The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Good evening, Delaware, and welcome to The Agenda. Tonight, we continue our series of in-depth conversations with our candidates running for governor, focusing on the most urgent challenges facing our state. And I've made it clear to everyone here that it is education. A new report ranks Delaware 45th in education nationally, with alarming trends, declining test scores, increasing absenteeism, and troubling statistics across the board. This year's numbers show that 55% of children aged 3 and 4 are not yet in school. And the number of high school students not graduating on time nearly doubled from 2019 to 2021, now at 20%. Even more concerning, 75% of fourth graders are not proficient in reading. 82% of eighth graders lack proficiency in math, and 25% of students are chronically absent. Tonight, we are joined by Matt Meyer, Democratic candidate for governor, who has laid out an ambitious vision to turn these numbers around, from raising teachers' salaries to ensuring that every dollar spent is making a difference for students. Matt Meyer promises bold changes. And next week, we'll hear from Republican candidate Mike Ramone, as Delawareans seek a clear plans from both candidates to improve our education system. But now we turn our attention to Matt Meyer. What is his day one plan to tackle these alarming trends? And how will he ensure that these reforms take root? And what will it take to get Delaware back on track? Mr. Meyer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kerwin. It's great to be here on The Agenda.
I appreciate you coming in to talk about these issues. And it's not just because election season. You have been very conversational in regards to this for a long time. I made it clear to both of the candidates on and off the air is that at this point, as a Delawarean, as a parent that is still working to keep my kids in school and getting homework done on time, we are looking for a path forward. Depending on who the governor is, it isn't going to be something that can't go beyond day one. We're looking for day one changes as Delawareans, and there's an expectation there. And whomever the governor is, we need that.
Kerwin, you and many people watching may know me as the county executive. My family and many of my friends know I'm in this business because I'm really a pissed off teacher. I'm running to be actually the first public school educator ever elected governor of Delaware. And like you, I have heard many candidates come before with one solution or another to our problems in our schools and our education system for years and years and years. I can't tell you how many times as a teacher in my classroom, I heard rhetoric. Sometimes I'd be disappointed. Sometimes I'd actually get excited. But ultimately, I would be disappointed when there wasn't actually the delivery to my classroom, to my school, that delivered the meaningful change that we really need. Listen, I moved to Delaware as a child. My parents moved here. Why did they come to Delaware? They came here because housing was affordable. The cost of living was reasonable and the schools were quality. I went to Delaware schools and it enabled me to do incredible things, to go start a business in Kenya, to work as a diplomat embedded with the Army in Iraq, to get a law degree and work as an attorney and ultimately come back home. We need to have the highest quality education system, and we need an education system that's truly equitable. It's not just rhetoric, it is a moral imperative. If you have, let me just tell it like it is, you have black kids on one side of town getting a really, really low quality education in schools where the math proficiency and reading and writing proficiency is in single digits or in the teens, meaning less than 1 in 10 or less than 1 in 5 students in that school are achieving proficiency. And the white kids on the other side of town are going to private schools. Parents have 30, 40 grand to spend. That's a fundamental inequity. And it's something I've worked to address in small ways as county executive because we don't have much control over the budgeting of the schools, but we're committed to working not just on day one, but as every day I serve as your governor. It's a moral imperative. It's not just a policy statement. It's not about getting reelected. It's about who we are as Delawareans. It's about the community we want to build for tomorrow. And it goes, and sorry to keep talking, but it goes beyond education. I mean, how do you have an equal opportunity to get jobs if the education system is so equal? How do you have equal
How do we bring
opportunity
in
healthcare?
employers that are making a decision on how, I want to bring in this business. I want to make sure that my employees' children are going to a good school. And that's a factor, because their employees won't follow them through a transition or through a transfer if the area doesn't have good schools. And right now we are fourth from the bottom, fifth from the bottom.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
It's not a good case.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't know this. $3.5 billion is the state budget for education, roughly a third, give or take Kerwin math, about the budget. Yet many citizens feel that they're not seeing the benefits of that investment, and that's what it is. It's an investment. How can we justify the amount of money that we're putting in, $3.5 billion, and we're getting these poor results? Like, how can we continually justify it?
So what we got to streamline and get resources to classrooms. We have to give schools, and in some cases classroom teachers, discretion over some of the funding. So I can tell you as a teacher, there were times I would have to go to Kinko's and I don't even know, FedEx, whatever they call it, to get my own photocopies, right? They didn't, schools, it's crazy with the amount of money we're spending that kids are going to classrooms that are not safe in many instances. Kids are going to classrooms where there's nothing that you or I would see that says this is a well-managed, safe classroom. We need to make our schools great places to work. We have to make sure that we're not constantly lagging Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey in salaries. With the $3.5 billion, our school teachers, the personnel who go to the buildings, who are on the front lines of this education crisis, need to be compensated properly. Because what happens when you pay people well, you get people to stay, to continue to work. When you say, okay, we have police officers now starting at $80,000 a year is the starting salary for a Delaware State police officer. And if you chose to go into teaching, and I know most teachers are going to teaching, no, they're not going to make top dollar. They're not making 7 figures or even 6 figures anytime soon. But if you're saying it's going to take 20 years to get to what a state police officer is going to make in their first year, if it's going to take, 10 years to make what a truck driver is making in their first or second year, we have a fundamental problem in our society, and that extends beyond teachers to other staff. So we're going to look hard at how do we make sure we make schools great places to work, great places in terms of compensation, great places in terms of safety. We're also going to do some things that have been talked about a lot, but I don't think many governors have talked about. We're going to look at the districts. I believe the city of Wilmington should have a school district. I believe there should be local control. I was in 3rd grade in North Wilmington when the desegregation order came down as a result of, I'm not that old, but as a result of Brown versus Board of Education. And I in 4th grade was bused into the city of Wilmington, into Harlan. And the busing, I think, serves a purpose. But what happens to kids in the city of Wilmington, there aren't many kids like I was when I was a kid being bused into the city of Wilmington. What's actually happened is most Wilmington kids, in fact, just about every Wilmington kid who chooses to do their whole career in traditional public schools would be bused long distances, sometimes to Christina, to Glasgow, from the city of Wilmington. That's not fair. That's a fundamental inequity. We have to make sure we're getting resources to neighborhood schools, we're supporting them appropriately, and there's local control. And all the money can't go to these districts out in the suburbs when the city is being underserved.
So let's talk about the Department of Education when it comes to that. I truly don't understand their role as a citizen, okay? Not as the agenda guy, but as a citizen. I've seen what's happening in Christina School District, and I'm looking for something from the Department of Education in regards to guidance. I'm seeing these numbers. To me, that's where it starts, right? Someone needs a principal, so to speak, to run this whole thing. What is your day one plan for your next Secretary of Education? What are some of the things that you are charging him or her with?
Well, we got to be careful, Kerwin, that I had an opportunity in China. Actually, I went to China for the first time in my life 6 years ago, and we set up a conference call between Delaware kids in Christina School District, Downs Elementary, and Chinese kids who were going to an international school. The Chinese kids were speaking English. These are 4th and 5th grade equivalent kids, 9, 10, 11 years old, speaking with Delaware kids, 9, 10, 11 years old. The Delaware kids spoke Chinese, and the Chinese kids spoke English. I walked out of this room in Beijing with 4 or 5 other American elected officials. One by one, they came to me and they said, I want my kid to go to Delaware public schools. They want to go to Christina School District schools. So there are good things going on. We got to be careful not to use a cliche, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we don't want to say the Department of Education's bad. We got to sort of get rid of the whole thing. I like to say we're going to address the issues in our schools with a scalpel, not with a machete. We're going to go in and say, sorry, my wife's a doctor. We're going to go in and say, here are some things that really are working. What resources do they need? What additional people do they need? What can we do to unlock the power so that those good things grow? And what are the things that really aren't working and need to be shut down or combined with another effort?
So with some of that, because a lot of our school districts rely on programmatics in order to help fill in the gaps and to work with students afterwards, after school, and to bolster some of the curriculum. But a lot of that may not be working with the test scores that we're getting, with the results from the graduation rates and everything that we're getting. One, I don't think all of this can be handled through programmatics. And two, what is the return of investment? How much are we spending on programmatics from these school districts, from these individual schools? Who has the right to determine what goes out financially? And how is the public seeing the results of it?
So we have a formula to fund our schools that is fundamentally flawed. I don't know if you'll find an educational expert on educational funding in the country who will look at Delaware's funding formula and say, you're doing it right. Our funding formula was written in the 1940s.
And who administers that formula? Is that the Department of Education or is that the school districts?
It's by the State Department of Education disseminates the money. So here's, our schools are funded, very simplistically, it's an oversimplification, but basically our schools are funded by local property taxes. So Red Clay School District has a tax rate and you pay your tax bill. Christina School District, Brandywine, Colonial, and the VOTEC do it countywide, right? APO, they all have every year in your property taxes, you got to pay the schools some money. That is subsidized. That in addition to that, there's money that comes from the state. That money from the state, and many school systems across our country are funded that way. Across the country, most states, what they do is they recognize, wait a second, there's a problem when you fund just based on local property taxes. Wealthy areas are going to have well-funded schools. Poor areas are going to have less well-funded schools. And that makes inequalities worse. So in the rich areas, you're going to have very well-funded schools, and the rich people are going to get better education, better free public education, and you're going to have greater opportunity. And the kids growing up, families growing up in poverty who are struggling to make it, they have little shot, nothing close to an equal shot of the American dream, because they're going to schools that are underfunded. What most states do is they then use the state funding to rebalance, to say, okay, to those poor areas, we're going to make sure that here in our state, every kid has an equal shot. Every kid gets an equal allocation, or in some cases, for higher poverty schools, for schools where kids do not know English as a second language, they get additional money because it's more expensive to educate many of those kids. In Delaware, we don't do that. We provide what's called unit count, the same amount to every student. We've been doing it since the 1940s. Think about the values that the people in the 1940s designing this formula probably had for the state of Delaware. It needs to change as a matter of urgency. Now, to Governor...
How hard is that to change?
So to Governor Carney's credit, he didn't change the formula, but he did create something called opportunity funding, which is a series of one-time funds. I think it goes out another year or two, so that there's money to do this balancing. It's sort of in addition to rather than getting the funding formula right. The problem the next governor will have, the problem the Meyer administration will have, is that when that opportunity funding expires, there are these inequities in the formula that need to be addressed.
And if they're not addressed, the problem then reverts back to the way that it was.
Correct.
If in fact that those funds actually fixed it.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and I don't think it's fair to say the funds fixed it, or the opportunity funds fixed it, because not everything's funding. I started this by saying I'm a pissed off teacher. I can't tell you the number of times teaching at Prestige Academy where I read in the newspaper or even have politicians come to my school with some grand announcement, and I think it's exciting, and we're getting resources, and I never see them. I never ever see them. So it's incumbent on me as your governor. It's incumbent on whoever I appoint to be Secretary of Education to make sure those resources make it to the classroom. Now, they might make it to the classroom in ways that parents and the PTA and people actually see. It might be in other ways. Maybe it'll be in the form of teacher salaries to make sure that our teachers are really compensated and have not just salaries, but great benefits and great pension. So teachers in the region, if you're a great teacher in Philly public schools, you'll say, whoa, look at what's going on in Delaware. I need to be there. That's the kind of buzz we want to address, because when you do that, you're going to get great educators here. You're going to have great educators staying here, and we're going to be able to be more successful.
The one thing that, and I will talk about, I will compliment Mr. Ramon, but I'm also complimenting you to keep it fair. The way that you're thinking is younger when it comes to the way Delaware is thought. We've had a very old way of thinking. We talked about that in regards to education. What new way are we expecting for you from recruitment of teachers? Like because right now, the way that I see it is, we're not going to be able to compete in this market when we have failing schools. We're not paying them well, and you're talking about how to address that. But what are we doing, or hopefully we'll get something from the Secretary of Education to deal with this great recruiting? Like, how are we going to think
and
outside
let's be
the
honest, it's not just recruiting among the general population, that's true, but it's also recruiting teachers who are culturally competent, making sure it's not right if you have students of color who spend all their time in public schools being bused out to the suburbs, right, assuming they live in the city, being bused to somewhere not familiar to them or their family, and being taught by teachers who don't have the cultural competency to understand where they're from and what their background is. So it's really important in recruitment that we keep that in mind, that there is a severe shortage of teachers of color in Delaware, and that's something we need to address. But more generally, in terms of recruitment and retention, I can tell you stories. Lance Love, I'm going to pick on him for a minute. He's still teaching in Delaware Public Schools, but he left my school because he just had a baby. He's a military veteran who, this is 10 years ago, military veteran. He was, I don't want to say the best, he was the best fifth grade teacher in our school, but we had a lot of best fifth grade teachers, in case any of the colleagues see. He was an amazing teacher who could, African-American, who could speak to kids at Prestige Academy in ways that I couldn't, to be frank. He needed to make $50,000 when he just had a baby.
There's no reason why he should not have.
And he couldn't get it, so he left our school. He left our school, he went to teach somewhere else. I believe he ended up winning Teacher of the Year 3 years later at another school. That's not acceptable. We need to make sure compensation is top-notch, but it's more than that. Most teachers I know, just about every teacher I know, ain't in it for the money. Right? So money matters. You can't expect teachers or paraprofessionals, teachers' aides, to come to school and not be compensated enough to feed their family, provide healthcare. We need to be able to say, if you work here 20 years, if you work here 10 years, whatever the pension system is, we're gonna take care of you, right? We're gonna take care of you with healthcare, et cetera. But it's also safety in the classroom. It's also work environment. Yeah. It's also saying that, okay, we're gonna give you tools to teach kids conflict resolution curriculum, right? So yeah, you gotta teach math, and yeah, there are tests, there will be some testing, right? But there's other stuff too. We know that the kids you're teaching today, unlike probably Kerwin when you and I were kids, they really, really need to learn tools of resolving conflict at a young age. Kids need to learn tools of money management and building wealth at a young age, right? Kids maybe need to learn a foreign language at a young age. And we're going to give you those tools that I hope will not only produce educational outcomes that's beneficial to kids and families and our economy and our community, but also makes teaching more enjoyable. I found when I was teaching things that was more relevant to what kids and families were seeing and I was seeing outside of school, it's a much better environment.
flash to bang. That's a military terminology that I use sometimes, but some of the changes that we're talking about are not overnight changes, right? It's going to take years. How long, if elected governor, will Delawareans see their children's education a true difference? Like how long will
it take?
change?
I think there are some things you're going to see changing within a matter of months. There will be announcements after November 5th, before January 21st, before I'm sworn in, that will indicate a sea change in how some children across our state are educated. I'll say that. But other stuff, it will take a year, 2, 3, I think, to see some of those changes.
Yeah. So what will, in our remaining minutes here, what can you tell Delawareans that are worried, the ones that have come up to me and said, Kerwin, my big thing is education, what do you think? And I tell them, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. What could you tell them?
So the issues, it's very easy with the issues we're seeing in our schools to get an obscure budget math and a very detailed policy talk. When you talk to me, it's a moral imperative. It's about my whole service, my whole running for county executive and now governor at some level is about a teacher who, like a Delaware kid who grew up, ended up a diplomat in Iraq, ended up a lawyer, and came home to teach 6th and 7th grade math, who found that the situation is totally unacceptable in 21st century America and 21st century Delaware. You're going to have a leader who works with urgency to move things. Well, I'd love to tell you in January 2025, I'll be sworn in. You will see everything changed by September 2025. I mean, I'm the guy that went and bought the Hope Center, right? When people say, oh, there's problems with homelessness.
And I think that's what
we heard that
hoping
for years and years and years. There's problems, and say, okay, and maybe we have a little press conference or cut a ribbon and nothing changes. Yeah. That's not acceptable to me.
Right.
Because I know that there are kids there and there are families there, and in my life, I can name them. And I imagine some of the people watching today can name people too, who know that they are being deeply hurt and our community is being deeply wounded by these statistics that you talked about. And so there needs to be immediate change. Every child in Delaware should be able to go to a school, a public school, and get an excellent education. Every child. Every family should know that when they send their child to a Delaware public school, they're sending their child to somewhere safe and where they're getting access to amazing educators. They're going to teach their kids and prepare them to enter the 21st century world. And every teacher deserves to know that if they buy into our system, if they commit their time and effort to Delaware kids, they're going to be treated right, they're going to be kept safe, and they're going to be given the opportunity for a long-lasting career here in Delaware, where they're not going to have to look to Maryland or Pennsylvania. Maybe they'll want to jump from one school to another for various reasons, but they're going to know that if you come work in Delaware schools, you're going to be treated right.
And what assurances could you give to employers, and there would be promises at this point, that you are producing, your educational system in the state in which you govern is producing the next workforce, quality workforce? Because right now, I don't think that Governor Carney can come in and say that.
Right. I think, well, in the first place, to leaders in the workforce, you're our partners in this. You're not. I don't expect workforce leaders. If you're in a small business, if you're a manager at J.P. Morgan, I don't think you should just sit back and say, "Oh, Matt's going to fix the schools, and we're going to wait till they're fixed." And look at the resumes, and we'll see an improvement in the resumes, and we'll know.
Right.
I want you to participate in it. I want you to understand that if there's a single third grader in the state of Delaware who's not reading on grade level, right? That's all of our problems. It's shared service, shared sense of responsibility, but also just know I'm someone who will take action. As I mentioned, the Newcastle County government, no county government in the state has really any real control over schools.
Yeah.
I am someone who has a computer science background, who's passionate about kids having opportunities in math and tech. We created a program with called 1,000 Kids Coding in partnership with Code Differently. You know how much money I had to start 1,000? You want 1,000 Delawarean kids to learn coding. They're not learning in school. Pretty much 100% of them are using these phones, but they're not learning how to develop apps on the phone. That's fundamentally wrong. I want to make sure they learn how to program apps. It's easy to say, but you need money to do it.
And it's been successful.
We had no money.
Right.
We had no money. I went and begged. I went to Capital One. I went to JP Morgan. I went to Barclays. I went to area banks. I went to foundations. I said, just give us a few coins to start this program. We started it thanks to the work of Stephanie Eldridge, Tariq Hook, and the folks at Code Differently, Vanessa Phillips, who you know, on my team, Autumn Tuxword, and we put together a program. And we did it, I think, the first year with 30 kids. Now, I think this summer, close to 200 students. We've, over 1,100 students have gone through our program. Code Differently. It's after school, it's summer, and now close to 100 students have gotten jobs, paying jobs, before they graduate high school, or certainly within a few years after high school, paying jobs from JP Morgan through this program. Those are the kind of programs we need. I believe, as county executive, I've done them outside of school, which is great. I hope my successor continues it, but we're also going to look, how do we incorporate that into the education, not just at the junior high and high school, not just in middle school and high school, but also at the elementary school level. Make education engaging to kids. Make part of it, listen, it's easy to blame the system and say, here are the things we need to do to, more funding and more that, but a lot of it is about change. How do we make our curriculum more responsive? I often felt as a teacher who'd spent time in the private sector that our education system, the curriculum, was something like designed in the 19th century that we were trying to tinker with to make appropriate for the 21st century Delaware. And we're going to take a hard look, everything from conflict resolution, technology to foreign language. What do adults need? What do young adults need to cope and be successful? Sometimes mental health skills. What do they need to be successful in a 21st century Delaware? And that's what we're gonna work to deliver in partnership with the community.
And transparency as well. I hope that it will be shown to public, and we do a good job of this with freedom of information, but I know there's a lot of Delawareans that want to know, where is all this money going for education? And then rank it in terms of effectiveness. And non-effective programs should not be funded the same just because it's another fiscal year. Oh, well, they met all of their grant requirements and they've reported properly and everything. So now we're going to hit them again for another $200,000.
One thing we've seen in recent years, particularly in state government, is that political insiders, I'm just telling it like it is, political insiders have a different deal than you and I do.
Absolutely.
When you're a political insider and you take money from our unemployment insurance fund at Department of Labor, there's hardly an investigation. The Public Integrity Commission reasons that, there's nothing we can do, we can't prosecute. There's like over $100,000 of unemployment insurance money missing. They know who did it. He passed away, okay? But there needs to be a full investigation, needs to be open to the public. When I had students at Prestige Academy on the east side of Wilmington, when their parents, brothers, mostly brothers, occasionally sisters, were getting in trouble, the Attorney General never had problems prosecuting. There never were these issues. They weren't connected that way. We need to end this game of political insidership, because I think I mentioned that with respect to funding, because when you do that, you find there are all these pockets of money. They're just being wasted. In some sense, fraud, sometimes just waste and abuse. And when we went to the county, we took a line by line look. We uncovered about $5 million of money, of savings, right? Everybody said, the budget's impossible, there's no money here. $5 million of savings that could be better used. So we did things, ultimately used it for things like 1,000 Kids Coding, took some of the money, actually gave it back to taxpayers. First property tax cut that any county executive has implemented. We implemented. And so we're gonna do things differently. And we're gonna make sure that every dollar is tracked, and that we look hard at programs, first for fraud, waste, and abuse, but also, as you mentioned, just for ineffectiveness. Okay, nobody's stealing, nobody's doing anything wrong, but this isn't working.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here. Mr. Matt Meyer has told us his day one plan. I've asked for it, and they have delivered it. Next week, you will hear from Mr. Mike Ramone, and he will give his plan as well. I'm very excited about this conversation. I look forward to another great conversation with Mr. Ramone and help you decide on Election Day who's your choice. You've heard it here, you've heard it accurate, you've heard it on the record right here on the agenda. Look forward to seeing you next week right here.
The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Welcome to The Agenda. Today we continue our series of interviews with candidates for governor of Delaware. Joining us is Mike Ramone, the Republican candidate. In a state where it has historically been challenging for Republicans to win statewide elections, Mike brings a unique perspective shaped by his years of small business ownership and as a state representative. Unlike his opponent, Mr. Ramone has been a legislative leader within the state legislature. In this interview, we'll focus on one of the most critical issues facing Delaware, education. Despite spending more per pupil than the national average, Delaware is still at the bottom 5% of states for educational performance. The state ranks among the worst in the country for the elementary and middle school proficiency levels. In 22 and 23 school year, only 24% of 8th graders were proficient in math, and 41% were proficient in English and language arts. We'll explore Mr. Ramone's vision for improving our schools and providing a better future for our students, just as we did with his opponent, Matt Meyer. Our goal is to give you a clear sense of where both candidates stand on Election Day and what is their approaches. Mr. Ramone, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Corwin. How are you?
I'm great. I'm
appreciate
great.
it.
I wanted to put this together, and I'm very thankful for you and Mr. Meyer saying yes to this. I understand that as a candidate, you have a lot going on. Mm-hmm. You're going up and down the state. I get it. But education, and the viewers know, is something that I'm not backing down on. I can't change the opinion of you. I can't change the opinion of Mr. Meyer. But what I can hopefully change is how you foresee the issues. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues that we are passionate here about at DETV is education. So we asked Mr. Meyer a series of questions, and through paraphrasing and what have you, we're going to try our very best to ask you the same set of questions.
Absolutely.
I believe it's important, especially before Election Day, that our viewership knows exactly where you stand on these issues. There should not be a question when they pull a lever for either you or Mr. Meyer, your stance on education. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, as a legislator already, you know firsthand about education here in the state of Delaware. You know how much it costs. I think we're close to $3 billion in education out of about 300,000 students roughly, and I'm concerned, mm-hmm. to say the least. And right now, I'm not sure if we can sustain our education system the way that it is. So I'm very anxious to know, one of my first questions is your day one plan for education. In a hypothetical situation, and I presented this to Mr. Meyer as well, you take your first day of office, what are your actions towards education? What are you going to do?
Corwin, thank you. The first and most important thing with education is we just have to realize what we've been doing for the last 32 years with one party, one set of eyes, one group of thinking has not worked. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. Our city has been ignored. Although the numbers you said are astoundingly horrible, 76% of the children aren't able to pass at a reading level when they go to move to the next level. We have I think 2 schools very close to us here where less than 5% of the children can read at reading level. 5 out of every 100 children we're pushing along even though they can't keep up because we did not give them the support they needed before we moved them into 4th grade. My day one started 18, 19, 20 years ago when I first ran. I ran on education. Mm-hmm. I ran against the Senate Pro Temp who's still in there and I lost. But the reality is we haven't fixed anything. And whenever we try to, we put together another committee or another initiative or another what I call babysitting service where we keep people busy. Education doesn't need another $800 million. People will not be able to provide the tax for that. What education needs is for someone to be brave enough to tear off the stack of Band-Aids on our education system that we use, these $800 million or more Band-Aids. Education doesn't need Band-Aids, Kerwin. It needs surgery. When we rip the Band-Aids off, that patient's septic and is dying. It's not going to make it through more Band-Aids. So for me, day one already started. I have a vision. We do stop automatic promotion in the 4th grade and moving children that don't have the ability to be successful in the 4th grade up, and then they sit and hide in the back of the classroom because they're embarrassed. That's not a good way to get a child educated. We have teachers who are awesome teachers, but to make more money, they have to leave teaching and go into administration. So our best teachers are motivated to get out of the classroom. That's not a smart way to grow education. Pay our teachers more, focus on our children more, and make sure Delaware, being one of the lowest states in the nation, for every tax dollar we take that actually gets into the classroom with the child and the teacher, we need to give autonomous control to the principals. Let the principals run their school, empower them. Karen Peterson and I, Senator Peterson, had been in for several years. And when I first got elected, one of my biggest issues was I don't see how we can use 19 school districts, a Department of Education, and a Secretary of Education who also have entire staffs to run a little tiny state like Delaware. San Diego County has one district with the same amount of children as we have 19. And don't forget, 19 districts mean 19 superintendents, 19 assistant superintendents, 19 secretaries, or actually, that would be probably 38 secretaries.
19 different curriculums.
19 different curriculums, 19 different disciplinarians, 19, everything that you don't have in that classroom with the teacher and the child. You need that many more, and sometimes more than that. It's not functional. It's not sustainable. The spending we've spent in this state is not sustainable in any levels of our government because the government's the biggest employer in the state. Problem number one, especially when you have a little state. But for education, the children are the future of us being able to have a strong, smart state. You heard my visions before. Let's bring some fintech companies into Delaware. Let's continue to do the biotech and the corporate structure in the world. You know, we have a very critical situation where people are coming in from outside of our state trying to have influence with the amount of money they're giving to candidates to be able to push a agenda. If that agenda takes away some of these sectors, we're even going to have less money for education. So right now, we need to strengthen the structure we have with local control. And I believe that local control starts in the high schools and trickles down, not in a superintendent in a school district. I think we can have much more supportive environments, much more flexibility of spending, and much more, what I would say is measures by which we keep facilities not profitable, but efficient. In other words, two of my districts, Red Clay, Christina, for years I've been in Dover listening to the craziness. Now you go to a Christina board meeting and you bring popcorn and beverages because it's like a horror show. It's absolutely ridiculous. You watch them until 1, 2, 3 in the morning. The one thing they forget to talk about is the children. That's why they're there. We've lost it. It's just grown into a beast that's no longer effective. No one will ever be able to make the correct modifications to the education system in Delaware if they're concerned about being reelected for something. Whether it's to be reelected as a mayor, whether it's to some of the opponents on the other side, maybe want to be congressperson, senator sometime, vice president, president. No, let's just worry about schools. Let's just worry about Delaware. I'm old enough that when I'm done my term as the governor, I'm going to be a pop-up. But between now and then, I'm going to do everything I can to make our schools the best, make our businesses the best, do everything I can to help Delaware be the best place to live. And then I'm going to be a very proud pop-up because I'm going to watch a whole generation of children get education, not get social promotion, get rid of this crazy testing procedures we have, these extracurricular activities that the teachers have to go to. We have computer-based training for our children, but yet we have to take teachers around for in-service and do all that. We've just lost our way. So education needs to be reconfigured.
Going back to it, Mike, what would you do? Your first thing, you're governor now. You've done with the campaign. You know that people are biting at your heels in regards to education. What are you going to do?
When elected in November, the first thing I will do, I have a very good group of people who were superintendents, who were principals, who are teachers or were teachers. They will all come together and we will reconfigure the way education needs to look to get the most value out of every dollar going into that child's classroom. If we have a mechanism by which you have 3 high schools in one district, that we have enough children to fill 2 and 1 can be closed, think how much money you just saved if you closed a high school and moved all those children. Now people are going to say, well, which one are you going to close? And all the parents are going to be upset. If I take 75% of the funding that I saved on that building and I put it into those 2 schools to help those children, the parents won't be too upset because I'll have a denser teacher to student ratio. I'll have more prioritization on modifications and running the schools. I don't have to worry about wasting money on heaters and air conditioners, HVACs, grounds, grass, all that goes away. Not to mention, maybe that building's then renovated for even nicer, better high school. Delaware has never factored in the 2 major issues that happen in education. One, a growing community has to keep schools coming in with the growth of the community. Unfortunately, often we wait for the growth to be there before we put the school in, so you have overcrowding already. You already have a dysfunctional environment. We need to set up a way that we are building in front of population growth, not after. And we have to find a way that we rescind when there's population decline. How can we have population decline in certain districts, but we still have the same amount of schools, and we've opened an enormous number of charter schools? Why do we have charter schools that have waiting lists long enough that they could double the size of the school, but we don't provide the funds to double the size of the school?
So are you recommending charter schools take a bigger role in
No,
education?
what I'm recommending is schools that are successful and oversubscribed to, whether growth of a community, like maybe Appoquinimink, or simply the ability of the school, the success of the school and people wanting to go there, we need to find a way to enhance those possibilities. Help more people go to those places when they want to go. Don't say, oh, we're only taking this much because it's charter. Don't say we're only going to do this because it's a charter. Charters were developed simply to be able to facilitate an environment that enabled children to go into an environment where they had more of their strengths could be used more. Cab Calloway of the arts, DMA, children who maybe wanted to get into the military or need a little more discipline. Wilmington Charter for mathematics. Every one of them was supposed to have a definition of what they're doing. If they're doing that and they have a very dynamic attraction to it, why aren't we supporting it and letting more children go there rather than people being upset that they can't get into a school that they really want to go to? We have schools that people can't get into. We have schools that people can't get out of. Why would the single mother down the street, have to go to the school where you only get 3 to 5% of the children able to read after their 3rd grade because she's going to work and she has 3 other kids to take care of and she can't drive them across an hour and a half to the other side of Christina or over to Red Clay to another school? That's not right. That's just so broken. I am only the visionary. I am only the person that will come up with the ideas. I will never be the smartest guy at the table. And I'm not going to sit here and tell a bunch of teachers and principals and superintendents how it needs to look. But what I am going to do is I'm going to give them the opportunity that we're going to bring out the whiteboard that's blank. We're starting over. What do you think it needs to look like? Now, there's one very powerful union out there. They call themselves the Teachers Union. This path forward may get them nervous for certain reasons. I don't think it's necessary. We have a shortage of teachers right now anyway. It would more enable people to make more money from the bottom to the top, so we would keep the best teachers rather than states around us purging our great teachers. And more important, it would give us an opportunity to focus on what we're supposed to be doing, and that's educating children. If a child gets to 3rd grade and that child's just not reading at 4th grade level, they should be given the opportunity to stay in summer school. And if they still aren't, they should be able to repeat 3rd grade. Oh, it's socially stigmas. Where I went to school, 2 children did not move to the next grade when I went from 3rd to 4th grade. They're still my friends. We still have talked all the way through school. They were the best ones in all the sports teams. I don't know what social, detriments it had. But what we're doing now is we push them up to 4th grade and they find a chair somewhere where they can sit and hide so the teacher doesn't focus on them. I don't need a political career, Kerwin. I'm going to do this because I want Delaware to be better. I don't need to keep a union happy. I need the kids who were failing to not be failed anymore.
Let me ask you a question. I'm picking up on a vibe. Correct me if I'm wrong. You seem to have a very business approach to how you would legislate. Today we're just talking about education, but in previous conversations, you've had a very business side of things. I've asked the same question to Mr. Meyer. I'm asking it of you in regards to the supplemental programs that the Department of Education and the school districts use as supplements, excuse the redundancy, to assist teachers and do some community advocacy and outreach. My personal opinion, mine only, is that some of those are being funded and are ineffective. Despite them meeting the requirements of the grants and all the things that they have to do to be good contractors or good vendors, there still comes down to whether or not you're effective. To me, my opinion, it seems as though that these programs are being funded almost on default. And millions of dollars is being poured into them. Not so much of that is being, I would say, beneficial to the end user. What is your opinion about this? Do you see this as an issue? And if so, what would you do to fix it?
The easiest way for me to address that without being negative, I'm not that guy. I want to look at what can we do better. I don't need to define what hasn't gone so well. We need to create an environment where there's levels of accountability, where if we're investing in our children, every tax dollar, what are we doing for that investment? Is it a business? Well, if it is a business, the child's a product, and our products are failing. The parents are there to support the child to the level they can. But with a socioeconomically diverse state, every parent doesn't have the same ability to give the support that certain children may need. So what do? The first major flaw is we count a child as a unit, or a special unit, or this unit, or that unit, and all these different classifications gives that child different levels of money for the school to be able to be successful. I might suggest a total different approach. We give a school a certain amount of money, and the principal decides how he wants that school to be set up to do it. Great principals are not always going to be great teachers. But right now, the pool of where we're taking most of our administrative people is out of the classrooms because of their experience. I don't think that's a detriment, but I don't think it's a necessary attribute in their resume to enable them to move on. I believe we should go back to what we used to have. We used to have a principal school, a school for principals that would go to be able to be qualifying for principals, not just taking people who we thought would be good. The portion of what you're suggesting is one of the largest crux of education. We can't just do things because we've always done them. I'm not going to get into another whole topic, but very much reminiscent of grant and aid. Well, we always gave them this, but we're going to give them that. What are their deliverables? Who are they helping? How are they saving the state spending money on these nonprofit worlds? All of those attributes. Same thing with education. But it needs to be done at the school level with a person who's running, quote, if you want to say the business of the school, with the money and the financing to give them the flexibility to guarantee success, not enhance probability of failure. We have done so much to make it so difficult and complicated for our teachers to be successful. No wonder so many are leaving. For me, it's really simple. You take each school building, you start at a high school level, you bring in middle schools or elementary schools that all feed into that like we used to do. In the old days, that worked. We had Dickinson High School, you had Skyline and Stanton, went to Dickinson, you had Lord Little, Heritage, Linden Hill, and I can't remember the fourth one, that all went to Skyline or Stanton. It was predictable. Everybody knew where they were going. Now we're taking bits and pieces of people and shuffling them all around. One of the most difficult times for a child's growth to stay on a good track, an educational track, is often when they go from middle school to high school, because it's a whole different farm of kids, and then they sometimes blend in a community that they never blended in. Sometimes at that point, I know this, that's when your dyslexia or some of your hyperactivity characteristics start kicking in that 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade. And then you're getting put in another school, and all of a sudden you're apprehensive. You're not confident anymore. I was in my elementary school, and I was the best kid in the school in math, really good in English, really good in history, never got anything lower than a B, normally got A's. By the time I got into middle school and going into high school, I realized that my reading wasn't as quick, and I had to go back and read it again and so forth. And that's when I realized I had some of that dyslexia. But then I went to my school, my high school, and what that school did, that principal, never heard of it before, broke us into phases. It was a larger quantity of children. They had 5 phases, and I was in phase 5, which is the highest of every single thing that had to do with math, business class, mathematics, algebra, trig, whatever. But on the English side, I was in late phase 3s because of my reading was a little slower. The history, I was a little lower. The point was when I got out, I knew where I was strong, and I was educated to my highest level of ability in that area. So I always use this analogy. My cup was full, right? We have so many children whose, depending on the size of the cup, they never get full. And I don't mean just the big cups aren't getting full. Some of the very little cups aren't getting full because we have children in a room that we're just putting there for social engagement, but we're depriving the child the ability of educating them at the level of their ability to absorb the education. That doesn't mean put them away in a room the whole time by themselves. There's still integration, there's still movement, but prioritization of putting them in a room where they feel that they're in a room with their peers, where they can all perform and be successful together. I do think there needs to be a critical mass of people within the school. So when you have high schools that only, half or 2/3 full, it's harder. But I do think it's something we need to do, and I don't think it's any more expensive than what we're doing now from what all the people who have done this in other states and can show you best practices at work do. We need to look at what's working across our country and digest it in the smallest, fastest, easiest state in the nation to be able to do it in without worrying about anybody else. Unions, you remember, there's an executive branch and a legislative branch, so we have to work together. I understand that. But somebody needs to take the bullet and somebody needs to be in the front.
Is that someone in our last moments here, the Department of Education? Do you believe that the Department of Education needs to be rechartered?
I believe we do not need a Department of Education, a Secretary of Education in 19 school districts. How we blend that and reconfigure it, I'll let the people in those departments all sit together with me and explain how they think that moves forward. But we have so much redundant expense before we even get out of how do you run the schools. It's anybody who looks at it, it's crazy. You gave the numbers. What in the top 5 in spending, in the bottom 5 in results. But when you look at the cost of living in Delaware, the schools that have higher spending than us, Connecticut, New York, very expensive states. Mm-hmm. The states have results lower than us, New Mexico, Mississippi, other states.
There's not many of them that have lower than us.
3 or 4. But so my point is, you're saying we're 4th or 5th here. No, when you add it together, bang for the buck of what we're charging people in the state of Delaware in taxes to help give our children healthy educations, we're number 1 on the bottom. Nobody spends as much as we do in a level of cost of living of what we have and get the results that we get. No one is worse. That's a catastrophe. That, in my words, is a crisis. To quickly just address what you brought up a few times, and I'm trying to be kind to not prioritize one important. We have a lot of crisis in Delaware, but we're talking about education. Some of the other crises can be mediated if we fix the first crisis of education. So education is probably going to be the priority crisis. But my concern is we can't wait until January to start this. It's got to start November 6th, 7th,
I call it
8th.
flash to bang, right? We have some things that need to be done right now. They need to be taken care of right now. Some of the things that we need to change are going to take 10 years, 5 years, and you have to deal with that. You have to be honest, very honest with the constituents that, hey, this isn't going to, it took us a while to get into this mess. It's going to take us a while to get out of it. We've just recently seen that with our country's economy.
Right.
But at the same time, some of these issues can be taken care of right away. So I urge Mr. Meyer and I urge you the same way that moving forward, we need to see something right now. As a parent that has children in the school system, as a taxpayer, as just a resident of the state of Delaware, we need to see something big right now.
Hey, Kerwin, we talk about choice, right? In so many things in life. But so many people don't have a choice for their child's education. And someone said, well, do you believe in vouchers? I believe in everyone having a choice to go to a school that can give them a fair education. They don't have that. Do you give a tax credit to them, or do you do something to help create more options for them? Yes, or you fix the problem. I'll come in November and start working. I get sworn in January. I've got that whole beginning of the year the team that we put together in November and December will start looking, getting things done, quickly put together task force that will make education a better place, decide what teachers should really be paid to get great teachers to stay in the classroom, decide how we bring real principals to school, how do we give autonomy to each high school and trickle down area for autonomy as opposed to a district of 14, 15,000 children, create an environment where we can support the parents that need more support because of the personal situation, but those who have more independence, we allow them to exercise that. If we're going to keep charter schools in the mix, then we find a way to expand the charter schools that are well received, and the ones that aren't, hold them accountable. We've done that. We closed one in Newcastle, but we also have to do that with public schools. If they can't get results for children, we should not be putting children in those buildings. It's just wrong. It's inappropriate for the children. And it's a lot of undertones of socioeconomic strife that we're not being a fair state, and we need to do a much better job of being fair.
Mr. Ramon, thank you so much for bringing this. I think that you've enlightened the constituents about your thoughts on education. We try to keep it as fair as we could between both candidates.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your information.
Thank you, my friend.
We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Tonight, now you've heard from both candidates for governor for the state of Delaware. Most pressing issues facing our state is education. We've outlined the facts. Delaware spends more per student than the national average, yet we are ranked among the lowest in the country for educational performance. In my opinion, Kerwin's opinion only, the Department of Education is ineffective, and major change must be done. It is needed. It's overdue. Our economic future depends on the strength and resilience of our education system. As Delawareans, we should be outraged, absolutely outraged, by what we've allowed to happen at our schools. We need accountability. More than that, we need consequences and transparency. It's essential in this process. The Delaware way, the notion of settling for what is comfortable and familiar, simply isn't working anymore when it comes to education. We must be innovative. We must be brave, and we must commit to real solutions if we're going to fix this. And remember, the power of change lies in the power of your vote. If you ever wondered whether or not your vote is important, here's the evidence. Citizens, Delawareans, I need for you to vote as though your livelihood and your future stability depends on it. Legislators, I urge for you to be as angry as your constituents. Thank you for watching the agenda this evening, and be sure to stay tuned for more from the candidates as we continue to bring you conversations that matter. Be safe, Delaware. We'll see you next time.
The agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Hello and welcome back to the agenda. Today we are thrilled to have Delaware State Senator Kyle Evans-Gay here joining us as she campaigns for Lieutenant Governor, a passionate advocate for her community. Kyle has built a reputation for her leaderships on issues like environmental protection, criminal justice reform, economic development. But as the election approaches, the race for Lieutenant Governor is heating up, with Kyle going head-to-head with Senator Ruth Briggs King. We'll explore how Ms. Evans-Gay experiences in the legislature has helped prepare her for this new role, and her plans for day one, and what she hopes to achieve in her first 100 days if elected. We'll also dive into what sets her apart from her opponent and where she sees the greatest opportunities for change in Delaware. At the same time, the race for governor is nearing its final stretch, with Matt Meyer and Mike Ramone both offering distinct visions for Delaware's future. The stakes are high in this election cycle, and today we'll focus on how the office of Lieutenant Governor can complement that of the next governor, and why this election matters for the direction of the state. So let's get started. And here directly in DETV Studios, Senator Kyle Evans-Gay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Yes, first-time guest. I appreciate you being here. Hope to see you again.
Absolutely, me too.
In some capacity or another. We've done, 2 or 3 debates this season? I think it's been 2.
Yeah, there's a great opportunity for people to have a great discourse. You did a wonderful job. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the folks who were live in Canaan,
yes,
and that were watching online as well.
It's been great. I've been I've been holding accountable to those that are running. I need to know the vision, and I'll tell you why. I've been passionate about education. I've been focusing on the issues since about May or June. I've said, what is it that Delaware needs that we're not doing well in? What is it that the voters are not seeing? What is the voters need to have more education on? And that is education itself. So I've been kind of direct with candidates in regards to that, and when they have less than lackluster answers, I've been bringing that to their attention.
Good.
But the other part about that is, I think that has to do with your vision for what you see as your role, from whatever that position is, and from you as a lieutenant governor. I think the vision is your first right now, because you really don't know what you're going to get into until you get in there, if you get in there.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing to your opponent. What do you want to accomplish like your first 100 days?
Yeah, the first 100 days, it's so important that you ask that, because we run and run and run. And what I've been saying to everyone is that really the campaign is just the dress rehearsal. This is our opportunity to have the conversations. And then on day one, we get to start with the good stuff and getting to work on behalf of the people of Delaware. 100 days in Lieutenant Governor's office looks different from the governor, who has to really set up the administration. As you know, the Lieutenant Governor has a couple specific roles. And so jumping headfirst into leading in the Senate, making sure that the legislature is operating, that we're presiding over the Senate, that we're building those relationships, bringing people in, that's going to happen before we know it. And then, of course, making sure that the transition for the Board of Pardons is smooth and doesn't affect those constituencies who are trying to access second chances, trying to have hearings, and making sure that that is smooth. Those will be forefront day one. But I think particularly for this role, a role that there's so much opportunity to define it for oneself, define it for the administration, define it for the people of Delaware. It's about taking the time to stop, make a plan, and communicate that plan, and to really work with the important stakeholders. You know, I know you spoke with former Governor Jack Markell recently. One thing I really admire about Governor Markell is that he took the time to sit down with each legislator who would meet with him. I think you really have to sit down with people, articulate your vision, and most importantly, listen. During my time as state senator, I've done town halls. I hope to be both in community with our communities and in community with our leaders in that first 100 days, so they know where I want to go with their help, and they can tell me how I can be a benefit to them. Yeah,
I look forward to hearing that. Some people say, hey, this is where I want to go, but this is my issue, Ms. Gay, is that Delaware's not doing well in a lot of areas. And I love to be able to brag about my state. And I find things to brag about, but I also know that there's things that we can't brag about. And there are some major things. And I've spoken about healthcare. I've spoken about education. And there's also finding a home here in the state of Delaware. It's more difficult. I believe that the divide between wealthy and poor is getting greater and greater and greater, and we're seeing that in regards to home ownership, and we're seeing that because that's the number one investment for people, and because of their inability to do so, I believe that wealth gap is increasing, all of which can't be fixed through the governor's office. You can make promises of change and whatever, but some of that has to fix at a different level. So what would be, out of all of what I've said and what you're doing, what are some of your day one priorities?
Well, I really appreciate you mentioning kind of healthcare, education. I think I heard some workforce in there, because that really, to me, speaks to where my priorities are. I'll tell you where I've come from, what I'm doing now, and where I want to go, right? I've come from a background where policy-wise I've been able to serve on the education committee, been able to work with early childhood education, and we've really transitioned our strategy, I would say, around that to both talking about it in the educational space and in the workforce space. And I really want to break down barriers between education and workforce. I want to talk about these two issues as they are so intertwined, because when we talk about early child care, we're talking about getting parents back to work. When we talk about K through 12, we're talking about building a workforce for the next generation. And we talk about early child care, we're talking about getting kids ready for school, imbuing equity into these programs so that every kid has an equal chance. And we can talk a little bit about the work we've done in the Senate to do that. When we talk about K through 12 as well, we're talking about getting kids an opportunity to succeed by showing them the opportunity that education has to offer. And so you're right. We can't brag about our education right now. We can't brag about our workforce. But I believe if we try to attack these two issues together and have programs that reach into both spaces, we're going to be more holistic in our process, and we're going to have better results for both on the back end.
I made it clear to gubernatorial candidate Matt Meyer that programs are great, but programmatics, I think, also put us in a situation that we are now. I think that we have to be very accountable as regards to every dollar that goes to a program, and ensuring that that is showing value other than programmatic success. Just because you made the milestones of that program and you've done well in your due diligence as far as accountability and accounting, that doesn't make you a successful program in regards to education. How did you affect the lives of the people, the students that you reached out to? Because it goes back to your point. Workforce is very, very important right now. I think the message that we need to give employers is that our students are ready. Right now, with our graduation rate the way it is and our reading levels the way it is, we cannot have that conversation and be confident about it. The other part that I've made clear to candidates is, when it comes to the education side, is the flash to bang. I believe that candidates such as yourselves have some great ideas and to making things work. My problem is, even though you addressed the idea and you even passed the legislation in May, it's going to take how long for it to be successful and be implemented into the schools? Gotcha. I think it could be up to a decade. I think it could be 5 years before we see a big delta in regards to educational change and education that can affect employers in a positive way in boosting the workforce. I know that a lot of that is going to be legislation. And because you are currently a senator, you understand how Dover works. Dover works at its own beat, and you have that pulse. You know how that goes. How would you say that that's going to be beneficial if elected to Lieutenant Governor?
I promise I'll answer that question, but you said something that really is central to who I am and why I'm running for office. And so if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a beat.
Do it.
I've been talking to people up and down the state for over a year now, and the big question is, why are you running for Lieutenant Governor? And I said, because I don't believe that I can run enough legislation to change the structures that need to be changed here in Delaware in order to see real results. So when you're talking about structures over programs, when you're thinking about big change, I'm so glad to hear that. And I feel like there are people across the state who are hungry for that change and ready to take those steps. When you talk about accountability, right? How is the money being spent? I just want to take a moment to think about how, because of legislative oversight that I led in the Senate, we're able to find unspent dollars in the childcare space, leverage those unspent dollars to go straight to families to reduce copays, in fact, eliminate them for the majority of those accessing the childcare payments, and do it all without adding additional tax burdens. And so when we talk about accountability, future Governor Meyer and I have talked about both this, right? Accountability, not for accountability's sake, accountability so we can do a better job. And so I do think that all of this wraps into how can we be better for Delaware? And I think that's the new generation, the new vision of leadership that we are offering. And I'm excited to have that conversation with Delawareans. When you talk about the Senate, my experience there, I ran for the Senate because, people have heard me say this, I was a frustrated mom. I have 2 kids, they're now 5 and 7. They were very little when I ran for office. And people suggested, you can wait. And I said, I don't have time to wait. My kids can't wait. Our kids cannot wait for us to take action. And when I got to the legislature, I quickly learned what's possible by passing legislation, by working together across party lines in both chambers, by building coalitions around ideas like the child care work, where we had folks from Sussex County supporting it, folks from the Newcastle County, folks from Republicans and Democrats. And I know that that will be an integral piece of executing the vision going forward. But what I also know is that we need to be more unified. We have a Democratic trifecta in this state. I hope that we continue with a Democratic trifecta. It's a privilege to have that. It is a responsibility, and we need to work better together. And it's my hope that having the experience I have in the Senate, I'm able to bring those relationships to the table. I'm hopeful that I can bring good news from the administration, and that together we can move forward with a unified plan so that we can change structures and not let politics get in the way.
Yeah, I think it's not only hopeful, it's necessary. We can't do this, or we're going to slip further and further down this cauldron of bad things happening. I wasn't aware of the billions of dollars that we're currently spending on education. I wasn't aware of the billions of dollars that we're currently spending on healthcare. Those numbers are continually rising. I still believe firmly that we can do a lot here in Delaware. We have roughly 1 million people here in the state. I think that's a great test group for so many other programs and organizations to come in and help us find a better way. Great. I just hope that we're facilitating those conversations. I hope that whomever is elected, that they have the wherewithal to continue and push and get that done and keep that mindset. So, I think that your knowledge in regards to how Dover works, it's essential. It's essential. I just want to be clear for not just me, but for the viewers too, that they know what your number one goal is, your passion project, what you want to bring to Delawareans to make their lives better, to make Delaware better. Every lieutenant governor that I've spoken with, and even every governor, has that one passion project, that thing that gets the most of their attention at times. And this is your opportunity to tell Delaware what's yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to tell you what mine is and what I will continue, because I don't want anything to be lost as we transition into a new administration. But it sounds like we have a lot in common. Education is top of mind for me. Like I said, I have 2 young girls. They are in our public schools. I am investing at the ground level. My family is invested in our local schools succeeding. My husband is there at the PTA meetings, helping out, while I'm down in Dover trying to do my best by education policy. In the new administration, I would hope to expand how we think about improving education. Not just the ABCs that we think about as far as the test scores and things like that, but how are we doing best by teachers? And then how are we doing best by parents, making them feel part of the community? And how are we doing best by kids? And that is the educational opportunity they have. It's those intangibles that they'll get, that confidence, that opportunity, that vision that they can create for themselves. But it also is critically the wraparound services and the ways that we reach them when they're in school with food, mental health supports, behavioral health supports. I've said this, a lot of places, my kids at school, they get breakfast and lunch. I don't know why we can't have that for every child here in Delaware.
Yeah, and I think that for me, when it comes to education, I don't want to turn this interview completely in education, and I think you knew that. You're messing with me. No, just kidding. I think that what happens to our students, especially our vulnerable students, between 4 p.m. and 8 a.m. or whenever school starts and stops is essential. Yeah. And there were times in generations prior to that I kind of took that for granted. Now we can't. Mm-hmm. So some of those programs have to extend into those hours. So we're continuing the work that we're doing with these students, especially the vulnerable students. I don't know, but when it comes to it, what is your vision for the role of lieutenant governor? Like, how does all this, I'm trying to bring all this into education, but what is your vision for that role?
Thank you for asking, because like I said earlier, we have such an opportunity here to leverage a statewide office, an office with a mandate to reach Delawareans in every community and use it to benefit those Delawareans, to be a helpful person in the legislature, a helpful person in the administration, but to chart a new path. And for me, I believe that the office should be nimble. I think it should be responsive.
Yes.
I think that we need to continue the important work where we've been addressing mental health and behavioral health. I think that we need to have an ability to really think about that structural change in education. But at the end of the day, while the governor's mandate is the entire state administration, the lieutenant governor's office, if staffed with talented people who reflect our state, can be a first responder in places where we need it. Mm-hmm. And I think that I'm up for that challenge. I know I can surround myself with people who are up for that challenge. And I think that I have a desire to be on the ground. I have a desire to be in places across our state where I can listen. And I think that outreach, that responsiveness,
it's essential.
We deserve it.
Right. And I'm comparing, but history says that our previous lieutenant governor was very much on the ground, right?
That's right.
There were communities that she was in that you wouldn't expect to see your lieutenant governor doing tasks that you wouldn't expect a lieutenant governor to see doing. And it was commendable, but it was also her job. And she took that very seriously. Yeah. You as possibly the next lieutenant governor, how will you continue to serve those underprivileged neighborhoods and areas? And is your expectation to be in there doing the same thing with your sleeves rolled up, getting it done?
I hope so. That is my intent. It's how I've operated as a state senator. It's been my pleasure to go, like I said, across the state with town halls. In places in my district where we have particular challenges, I've been able to partner with those on the ground, with local community centers, to really understand how I can be present in ways that are meaningful and impactful and that drive change and drive opportunity to see that change. I want it to be more than just performative. Mm-hmm. I want us to see that the impact of the office is meaningful. And I will be holding my partners accountable in that way too. Bring me in ways that make a difference. And I will hopefully be able to build out those partnerships statewide. I've already been able to do so on the campaign trail. We talked about it earlier. This is the dress rehearsal. This is the opportunity. When I make my case, I'm also asking people, what do they need from the lieutenant governor's office, the future lieutenant governor's office? So
is that the metrics that you use to find success in yourself and what you're doing?
The
items that you said that you're judging, like what is the metrics that you use to say, hey, I'm doing a good job, or I'm actually reaching out to the community, I'm doing a good thing, people are happy, I'm nailing it. Like, what are some of the criteria that you use?
No, that's a great question. I would say that you can't go on vibes alone, right? So what we're looking for is, like I said, that translation into action orientation. For me, being a senator, you see that with legislation, and you can see that you've gone from an idea to advocacy to seeing something to fruition.
Right.
It's harder in lieutenant governor's office, I think, to be that direct. But unless you can measure your success, unless you have a plan, then you can't go back to the people and say, look what we've done.
Right.
And so what I've been telling people is you start with a strategy, and that's what we talked about in the 100 days. You start with articulating the plan, you start with saying where you're gonna focus, and you start by asking people how they can help with that and where they need that help. Mm-hmm. You've got to make a strategic plan for structural change. You've got to make a strategic plan for making an impact in community. We ask this of our business partners. We ask this of our nonprofit partners. Like I said, I'm running to be a new generation of leader, and I'm hoping to bring some of those principles into the government office.
I hope to see it. I want to see it. The gubernatorial race is not finished yet.
That's right.
There's still a general election that has to go forward and do some things. And how are you going to work with both candidates? I mean, because you don't know who's going to win.
Yeah.
How do you feel, and as far as working with whomever, and what's your incentives there?
No, I appreciate it, because I've been answering this question for over a year now, because there was a primary as well,
Yeah.
right? And importantly in Delaware, and it's important for your viewers to remember that we don't run as a ticket. So they have to vote
That's right.
down ballot. And I'm going to encourage them to go all the way down the ballot, especially those local elections, the representatives, senators, town council, city council. Those people make such important decisions. And I hope
Yes.
everyone goes all the way down the ballot there. But you have to choose lieutenant governor separately. So I'm making a separate case, but I'm telling you that, should we have, like we did, 30 or 40 years ago, a different ticket, we'll make it work. Because I do believe that everyone who is stepping up with the right intention to do the right thing on behalf of Delaware. Now, I'll also tell you that I'm really excited to work with our next governor, Matt Meyer, and I'm really proud of our ticket up and down the ballot. We're being led by our next senator, Lisa Blunt Rochester, who continues to just really, there's no words. There's no words.
She's taken off a rocket ship that is going to be I believe, in my opinion, our next senator, and is going to do a great job for us, as she's already done in the House there. And I look forward to her next move.
And she's taking care to make sure that Democrats statewide are seen, heard, and that the vision is shared. And that is the type of leadership that isn't just an election year. She's leading all of us in the long term.
Well, we're getting towards the end of the show.
Sure.
Last couple minutes.
Yeah.
Tell us why people should vote for you to be the next lieutenant governor.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to make a short pitch here. Really, like we've talked about a little bit, is that I'm ready for change, but I think change in the way that a lot of us have been asking for years. I start off by telling you I was an angry mom who went to Dover. I'm looking for people who are dedicated to saying what they are going to accomplish and working with community to get there. That's who I put my energies behind before, and now I'm working to be that person statewide. I think a new generation, a new perspective, a new vision, and I think you'll hear from my opponent that she believes a new party is the right change. And I think you have to go on what's been accomplished, look at our records, look at the pieces of legislation and the initiatives, the successes in 4 years that I've been able to move through the General Assembly, the partnerships that I've been able to make. I want to continue that work with a statewide mandate. When you think about some of the issues that are going to define this election, reproductive justice, common sense gun laws, safety in our communities, I have been able not only to vote in favor of many of these initiatives, but lead on them. And I am proud of that record. And I believe that my record and my vision matches the vision that Delawareans have. I have a young family. I have chosen Delaware, and I am ready to give back to this state every opportunity that I have been blessed to have. And so I am excited to run in this race. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm going to ask your viewers and everyone across the state that they'll support me and our county executive as he moves on to the next role as well.
How has your family held up over the past 3 to 4 months? I know that you're a mother. You take your job very seriously as mother,
Yes.
and it's not easy campaigning. It's not. So how is the family held up?
It is not easy campaigning, and you're right. Mom is my best role. My family, I just can't say enough good things. You're gonna make me get emotional, but I've got the most supportive partner. I've got parents, an extended family who really believe in what we're doing. And my kids have had amazing opportunities to see every part of our state, and we've incorporated them into what we are doing in ways that they ask questions about why they can't vote, and they're a little upset about it. So I think that a friend of mine says we should always do our work like the kids are watching. They are watching, and let us be the best example for them moving forward.
There you've heard it, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Kyle Evans Gay, thank you so much for joining Senator
Thank you
Gay.
very
I
much.
appreciate it. We hope to have you back here on the agenda real soon.
Fingers crossed.
Real soon. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, 1 year ago today, the world watched in horror as the conflict in Israel and Gaza escalated to unimaginable levels. Bombs rained down on neighborhoods, rockets soared overhead, and amidst the chaos, something was lost. Something more than buildings, more than territory, more than military objectives. What was lost was humanity. Because the war isn't just fought on the battlefields, it's fought in homes, on streets, in schools, and in hospitals. It's fought in places where civilians and families and children and people who have no say in the fight find themselves paying the ultimate price. And on this day, 1 year ago today, the world saw the cost in real time. We saw it in the images of crumbling buildings, in the eyes of mothers that are searching for their children, in the haunting silences of lives erased by senseless violence. We saw it when a missile shattered a family dinner. We saw it when a rocket obliterated a schoolyard. We saw it when hospitals became war zones and when places of worship were no longer sanctuaries, but targets. But we just didn't see it. We felt it. We felt it when we asked ourselves the same question over and over again. How did we get here? How did we, as a global community, allow this to happen? The answer isn't simple. It never is. It's a complex web of politics, of power, and of history, and of tragedy so old that it is ingrained into the fabric of the religion. But one thing remains clear. In the fog of war, the one constant is suffering, and it's civilians who bear it the most. Today, as we reflect on what's happened since, we must ask ourselves a very difficult question. Not how we got here, but how do we move forward? Because the world doesn't need more words. It needs actions. And that action isn't military. It isn't about retribution or retaliation. It's about remembering that in every war, there are faces behind the numbers, names behind the headlines. And there are children who just want to grow up, and parents who want to see their children grow up and want to see their children come home. 1 year later, we are still witnessing the consequences of violence that spirals out of control. 1 year later, the world has grown tired of the images of destruction. But the people living in this reality, they can't turn it off. They can't move on. And we can't fix the past. We can't bring back the years of their lives that they lost. But we can demand from those who hold power accountability. We can demand compassion. And here in the United States, in just a few short weeks, we have the opportunity to demand exactly that from the people that we elect to represent us. As we head into this election, let's not be afraid to ask the hard questions of our leaders. Let's demand to know where they stand, not just on foreign policy, but on humanity. Let's ask them how they plan to protect the innocent, and how they'll handle global conflict, and how they'll work to prevent another year like this from happening. Because 1 year from now, we should not be sitting here asking the same question, looking at the same images, and feeling the same sorrow. 1 year from now, we can hope for peace. And in hope is something that we can all still vote for. That's our show for today. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Good day. Good evening. With the election fast approaching, the stakes have never been higher here in the state of Delaware. Tonight, we sit down with Ruth Briggs King, a dedicated public servant and candidate for Lieutenant Governor for the state of Delaware. In a state where Republicans often face uphill battles, she's committed to addressing critical issues like education, economic growth, and public safety. We'll delve into her motivations for this role and how she plans to unite a divided electorate. Let's get to the heart of the matter. We welcome Ruth Briggs King. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you and your viewers tonight.
Yes. I mean, I've moderated one of your debates so far. I think it's just been one debate. We've moderated so many this season, but I know that you've been busy. Every candidate that we've spoken to has been up and down the state on numerous occasions, sideways, small towns. How are you doing? How are you keeping up?
I'm doing very well. I've always enjoyed being out with people, meeting people, listening to them, finding out what their concerns are, working hard for them. So it's neat to see some different faces in different parts of the state that I haven't seen before. But you know, the issues and concerns are the same throughout the state. One would be surprised when we talk about education, public safety, the business climate. Whether you're in downtown Wilmington or in downtown Georgetown, some of the concerns are the same.
Yeah, it's some of it is seamless throughout the state. We don't have a lot of time, so we have done our best, to ensure that all the candidates have an equal amount of time to talk when they're here on the show. We're not being biased between one or the other, so we want to get down to brass tacks and ask questions. And my first question is, why Lieutenant Governor for the state of Delaware?
I think having served 14 years for one district, but reaching out beyond that district on many issues, and just felt that I have more work to do and I can give a lot more statewide. I think I'm uniquely prepared, having served on joint finance committees, education committees, been appointed by 2 governors to different really strong task force that needed, a lot of guidance in hand there. And I just felt I have so much more to give. I think more than a politician, I'm a public servant. And I want to do things to improve our communities, improve our state. And I just felt I'm not done yet. I have more I can give.
So it's what we've experienced oftentimes with the lieutenant governor here in the state of Delaware. It's a very, I like to call it, roll your sleeves up kind of position.
Right.
You're interfacing with the public. You're working sometimes as a social worker for families, and people are like, yeah, the lieutenant governor is like helping someone with housing or whatever. And you're cutting a lot of ribbons and you're doing this stuff. And I understand it is a very busy position. But what is your day one plan once you, if elected, get in office?
My day one plan actually begins November 6th, the day after the election, to have that agenda. I put out some very specific things I want to accomplish, and a lot of those related to education. I just don't want to come in day one and say, what am I going to do? I want to have a plan ready to go because that's just the type of person I am. I want to have a team ready. I've always been good about building a team and reaching out to different communities to make sure I'm representing those different communities on my team. So day one, I'll have that team in place that will know, for instance, there'll be someone from the city of Wilmington that understands the needs in the city of Wilmington, as well as someone from Sussex County that understands, and we bring that team concept together. I think it's having that experience in developing leadership, developing talent, and making sure you're reaching across the aisle as well. I think that there's some good people in the offices right now that have been doing good work. I'd want to continue those things that we've been doing well, and I want to focus on those things where we've not been doing well, like education, because it's time to stop the silliness and really get down to some brass tactics.
And that's going to be my first question is, we have been diligent, I believe, here on DETV and focusing on the issues. The issues that I know that we've harped on this show has been education. We want our viewers to know that there's an issue. We want our viewers to know that we are collectively tired of it. It needs to change. Not only that, but it can change, right? The ability is there. And I don't want education for folks to think that education is a buzzword that only happens every 4 years or every 2 years, whatever the election cycle is. It is something that needs to continually be at the forefront of everyone's mind here in the state of Delaware because it has roots to so many other things. So when you're telling me about education, I would really like to know, and so would our viewership, would really like to know your thoughts on education and what are some tangible goals that you have here for near term.
Well, first of all, it's having the will, and I have both the will and the way, the path forward. Having been an educator, and I was an educator for 7, almost 8 years, career technical education was one of my specialties, and I'm so disappointed in what we're not giving our students, the parents, and the community. Nothing is going to bring you out of poverty or bad situations more than quality education and educational opportunities. When I look at the city of Wilmington, and I frankly have asked the question, why don't we have a new school in the city of Wilmington, a high school where our kids aren't bused out of the towns, out of the community where they live? Because I think you build a sense of community when you have a school in that community, and you build the students as well so that they feel comfortable in the classrooms where they are. I think it's coming back to a couple of things for me. One is equity in funding and education. And I have sat on at least 2 task forces where they talk about how we need to change the funding formula, and they spend money on consultants, and nothing ever comes back into the districts or back into the classroom. The money doesn't get to the students, and it doesn't get to the teachers. So there's all talk about what we need to do, but there's not that way, that path forward. And I've said it before, your education, the quality of your education should not depend on your zip code. We should be funding our schools equally and equitably. I happen to live in Sussex County where there's this thing called Sand and Sun, and so they have a lot more money to invest in local funds than you do in the city. It's clearly not fair, and I'm not sure reassessment's going to take care of that. So what I'm saying is let's look at and make sure we're funding our schools the same, equitably. The second thing we have to address is absenteeism. On any given day in any given school district, more especially in the city, 25% of students are not in the classroom. They can't get learning, they can't get some of the other wraparound services. We need an authentic discussion. Why aren't these children in school? Are they caring for another family member? Are they doing daycare for a younger sibling? Or is there reason why they're afraid to go to school? Maybe it could be group violence or some other intimidation. We need to have that real discussion, because when a student falls behind from being absent, they fall grades behind. They're not on grade level by grade 3 and reading at a certain rate. The likelihood they're going to fail or drop out increases. Nothing empowers a person more than a high school degree or moving on for education. But when they don't get that, nothing holds them or pushes them back more than that lack of education. So you're creating this vicious cycle of poverty that's tied to education or the lack of education opportunities.
Do you know, and you're currently a representative, do you know, is there a plan to deal with absenteeism in the state of Delaware for these students? Is it, and if they do have a plan, is it something that they can turn around fairly quickly, or is it something that's going to take several cycles and a few years to fix? What I'm not getting from the legislature is that there is a strong plan. Is there a plan?
I haven't seen a plan. And last year, in 2023, I met with the Secretary of Education and said, I'm very concerned about absenteeism and as well as disruptive student behavior. There was not really a good plan. So I put together and I said, I'm not just going to talk about it, I want action. And I've said that I wanted to reduce absenteeism, student and teacher absenteeism, by 50% in 5 years. I think that's, if you don't set a goal, Kerwin, you have nothing to go towards. And I'm one of those, I want to set a goal. I want to see us moving towards that. We're reducing this. Another problem is the truancy courts. They're really not enforcing when a child's not in school. So I've talked to a lot of teachers that are, assigned to teach at homebound instruction or to deal with truancy. And it's like there's just a lack of accountability. And I think that if we help the parents understand why it's important for this child to be in school, and then we hold the parent and the teacher accountable for getting that child in school.
Do you feel as though, and this is a direct question, that the Department of Education needs to be
Absolutely. I think that it's too much at a high level and it's not working down in the classrooms. They're coming up with a lot of policies or ideas, but it's like chasing the tail of a dog. They're not making sure, they're not slowing down and making sure this is working before they move on to the next thing. Education wasn't meant to be a cure for everything in our community. Education is meant to educate our students so they have opportunities, so that they can be self-sufficient, so that they can move on to some of those dreams. And I just think they've lost their way, and if we don't give them a good focus on where to go, that's part of the problem. I think parents want the best for their kids.
Of course.
And parents want a choice. And we have so many parents that really those kids don't get a choice in their education. This is where you're going. You're locked into here. And whether they want to go to a school and it can't accept any more students. Parents and kids know where real learning is going on, where they feel safe in the classroom, and they deserve that choice in education to be where they want to be, the best outcome for what they want to do in their lives.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly and that the expectation is being set properly for our viewership is that if elected, not only is education at the forefront, but we should expect some change fairly soon. Maybe not to fix all of the problems per se, but there will be change.
There will be, and I think one of the things that's very important, I've always said, we must include the stakeholders. That means talking with the parents, talking with the teachers, and getting them on the same wavelength about what the problem is and how we're going to solve this. We need parents and teachers to work as a team. And we see that with good coaches that do that. They bring the parents in and they coach these kids to success. If we can do it on a football field, a basketball court, we can do it in the classroom. Let's use some of those good things we know that work to motivate the students, to get them in the classroom, to keep them in the classroom, so they can look at that success off the field and out of school years later.
I love it. Another big thing that we have to talk about, and I've asked your Ms. Kyle Evans-Gay, excuse me, that's running against you, about economic development. I find it very important. It is absolutely necessary for us to grow our state economy. It has been fumbled, per se, in previous years. We've started a whole new agencies, we've had great ideas and all these other things. What can we do? What can you do if elected as Lieutenant Governor to ensure that business development is occurring and being successful here in the state of Delaware?
Small business matters. People, we have so many entrepreneurs that want to start their own and grow their own small businesses. I have been to different farmers markets in Kent County and met bakers from the city of Wilmington that don't have enough yet to start their own bakery per se. They're baking out of the house and going to farmers markets because there's so many roadblocks. There's access to capital. There's understanding how to start a business. We lost the small business element that we used to have in state government. They went after the prosperity partnership, which is a good idea, but they dwindled down small business. And Delaware is made up a lot of small businesses that make up, if you add them all up together, that's a large sector that can grow the economy. 2 years ago, I helped sponsor what's called a kitchen incubator for those people that were maybe baking in their homes, or maybe they were making jams or jellies. And it was where they could get a commercial kitchen that they didn't have to expense out or find a location for. And now we have about 20 thriving new businesses, all the way from food trucks to those that are making jellies and jams and baking goods, and one has a small catering business. So it's having that vision of what we need. It's just not all big business, it's small businesses. I met a man at one of the Monday clubs, and he was telling me his son's been trying to get his business off the ground in Wilmington for over a year. It's pieces of red tape, it's getting the finances. We need to cut through that. We need to have a business-friendly agency where you can go that can help walk you through the steps you need from startup to so you can open the door. Because I really think small business, we're not getting a lot of large business coming to Delaware. I think a lot of it is small business growth.
And as Lieutenant Governor, how are you planning to make that happen?
I think working with, and I think if we have the right, and we do have 2 gubernatorial candidates who both have that business mindset and wanting to grow business, I think we need to go back to the things that work. There was a book that came out, it was by Seth Godin. He said, quit the wrong stuff, stick with the right stuff, and have the guts to do one or the other. And I think it's time for Delaware to look at what really works best to get people working in Delaware. I think small business is the backbone of our state. Supporting that small business to get started, it will grow, and it will grow in size. It will grow so that it employs other employees. But I think we put too many roadblocks in there for some small business, and we need to remove those regulatory barriers.
Yeah. It has been a very tough election, I think, for Delaware. From the primary standpoint, I think that's fair to say. We haven't necessarily seen an election quite like this, a primary election, from the mudslinging to the it's not what we're used to here in Delaware. I think that's fair. Through that, we may have lost some voter engagement. What assurances can you give to someone making a decision about who to vote for, to re-engage into the voting platform, that you're the right person, but also have a little bit of faith in what we're doing here?
I think for me, when my last day in the House, they did a special ceremony, retirement ceremony. And when I listened to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say that, Representative, you are the best legislator I have ever worked with, or Representative, you're the most holistic, you look at the whole problem and you're really trying to solve what's best for the people. I think when you hear those kind of comments, and by the way, those were elected officials in your city of Wilmington that were speaking to me about how they're going to miss me. I think when you have that reputation for working across the aisle, for being civil, for being respectful, for being a hard worker, and so you're not too embroiled in the politics of it. I've been elected numerous times in districts by Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, because I was always focused on doing the right thing and not being the person that was always right, but doing the right thing for the right reasons. I think in this day and age, people want somebody they feel is authentic, is real and honest and forthright. And I've always said that yes means yes, no means no, and if I'm not sure, I have an open mind. Let's discuss this a little bit forward.
Right.
But I think people want that. They want that confidence that you're the person today that you're going to be tomorrow, that relative certainty, that confidence. That's my reputation that I have, not that I have given myself, but that others have given me, to be that hard worker, very sincere. And I think people appreciate that. When you ask me a question, I'm going to give you that straight answer and not this other answer. And I'm always going to focus on Delaware and Delawareans first. I've never lost perspective, and I'm elected by the people to work for the people. And that's what I want, the message I want to get is, that's the kind of person that I am. I take this job very seriously. It's an honor to serve, and I think a distinct difference is I'm not looking for what's next for me. Mm-hmm. I'm looking to do the right thing now for the people now.
How can we have seen lieutenant governors in the past be very roll your sleeves up in the communities, getting things done, almost a common fixture, especially in the communities around here in the city of Wilmington and throughout the county.
Right.
What assurances can you give to Delawareans that you will be the same, or what is your tactic in regards
and that's how I've always worked. I've always gone out there and go to where usually people may not go. So whether that was during COVID, handing out food, or making sure the different areas. One of the things I think that your listeners need to understand is I represent one of the most diverse communities in Delaware. 20% Latinas, 14% Black. So I'm representing and have done a tremendous amount of work, even bringing those communities together. And so if you talk to, brothers and sisters, aunts, and somewhere else, you'll find out that I have been very engaged in my community and answering their needs and responding with them and working with them. It goes hand in hand, and that's the type of person that I am. And I think some of it comes back from having worked in the medical community for 20 years and having taught for many years. It's always been about engaging and giving back, serving on numerous boards, Boys and Girls Club, serving on senior services at the Crisis Community House, which is a recovery and transitional home. That's who I am. That's how I live. And so I think when people get that sense that this is just not something I'm saying during a political time, this is the person. Know the person behind the politics, and I'm that person.
So because you're a part of all these committees and you've done this, can we expect if elected, a bridge in Dover?
Absolutely.
As far as, making sure that the legislature is staying on task, but not only that, but being that common bond, that glue, that peacemaker.
I think you can look for that relative degree of civility, of understanding. I said to someone, one of the jobs of the lieutenant governor is to preside over the Senate. And that means there's 21 different individuals representing 21 different districts and lots of people, and listening to them and making sure they're heard and respected, and making sure, above all, that the public, there's been a lot of things in the last couple of years that have been pushed through, and the public doesn't even get the opportunity to comment. Some bills on domestic violence that they were trying to railroad through that would have left victims being victimized again. Those are the kind of things that I just put a halt to. We can't have that. You have to listen to those you're representing. They come first.
So what are some challenges that it's 2 a.m, you're staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything in regards to this election and thinking about the state? What are some challenges that you foresee?
I think one of the challenges for me is that the people in Newcastle County, particularly the city of Wilmington, haven't had the opportunity to know me. They can read and see the history of things that I have done on their behalf that they may not even know about. My work with Delaware's Infant and Maternal Health Commission that I have worked on, looking at today's report from the Cancer Consortium and how much better we're doing because I served on that. Looking at those kind of things, my work in my community with Behavioral Health Consortium, and particularly with substance dependency and what I've done. Many of the things you have here, I've been working on in another part of the state because some of those challenges are the same. I would say if you know someone in my neighborhoods, ask them, what has she done for us? Because I've done so much in the communities. And what's important, Kerwin, it's not the legislation you pass, it's those things you help people with. Policy, procedures, or when they're faced with bureaucratic talk, that they need somebody to help them push through that and get a result. And that's what I'm known for.
So I am optimistic that you have a very strong vision for the future in the state of Delaware. I think it's fair that we ask you, with our viewers here, what is your view for the state of Delaware? What's your vision for the state of Delaware moving
My
forward?
vision is there's so much untapped opportunity out there, whether that be the ability to get federal grants and money back into the state that we haven't done, whether that's improving our education system so there is true movement for our kids and true opportunities equally for them throughout the state, whether that's working on safer communities throughout the state, working with, and I've done some different discussions with group violence prevention and intervention throughout the state, those kind of things. I see that and business opportunities, because when business does better, we all do better. And looking at those things, that's the opportunity that I see. And I think seeing that broad picture, having worked on so many of these initiatives over the years, I'm not going to learn about them. I'm ready to put what I've learned to use.
I love it. I love it. So in the last few minutes here, please tell people why they should elect you as the next lieutenant governor for the state of Delaware.
I think I'm uniquely qualified. I think I'm ready more than first day. I'm ready even before the day to begin. Having worked on the budget and the state budget, understanding how we spend our money, where the priorities are, understanding that's very important. I think the second thing is being ready and having worked in the legislative environment, built relationships. This is a relationship business. It's working with coalitions and working with people across the aisle and across different communities to get things done. I don't worry about getting the credit. I just want things to get done for the people, because bottom line, I'm in this to serve and to make Delaware a better place, and I want to take those opportunities we have, put them at the forefront, take them off the burner, stop talking and start doing. I'm ready to start doing.
Well, we're excited that you had an opportunity to come onto the show. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to address our viewers, to let them know where you stand. I think is very important, and letting people know about the big things that are on your mind right now. Education is a big thing on a lot of people's mind right now. Business development is huge on people's minds right now. The economy had a very good day today, right? Very, very good day. But that is, I believe, the beginning of what we're going to see in regards to lowering the interest rates here in the country. But at the same time, we can't forget about the problems that we have currently, right? We have to stay on top of these things. We have to make sure that Delawareans are getting the best shot that they can, whether it's small business, whether it's just paying their bills and making things happen. And we have a legislature and a governor and a lieutenant governor that supports that.
Thank you. I want to say, somebody asked me the other day, how many days left till election? And I said, well, actually, you can absentee vote or you can vote early. But I like the thing that Muhammad Ali had said, don't count the days, make the days count. And that's what I want to do these last few days, and I hope your viewers do as well, is make these last few days count. Find out more about your candidates and who is speaking your language and who understands and wants some of the same things you want and really has a plan to get those done.
Thank you, Ms. Briggs-King, for coming on to the show. We hope it's not the last time that you join us here on The Agenda. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here on The Agenda. As we consider the challenges facing Delaware, let's set partisanship aside and focus on what truly matters, the issues at hand, and the future we want to build together. Ms. Briggs-King has articulated compelling reasons for why she is the best choice for Lieutenant Governor. And as we look to the future, let's draw a powerful parallel to the recent SpaceX exhibition. They were able to catch a booster from space and dock it. Just as that innovation represents a leap forward, we must demand the same boldness and commitment in transforming our educational system. As the economy shows signs of optimism and companies announcing stronger quarterly results, finally, let's not forget about the ongoing issues plaguing our country, especially the growing divide between the haves and the have-nots. While there's hope for a soft landing in regards to managing inflation, we cannot lose sight of the socioeconomic challenges that persist right here in Delaware, particularly as the elections approach. Elected officials bear a profound responsibility to serve the public interest, make tough decisions, and be accountable for their actions. They must prioritize the needs of their constituents and work diligently to create a brighter future for all Delawareans. Your vote is more than a right. It's a responsibility. We've heard from both Democratic and Republican candidates for our state top positions, and now it's time to hold them accountable. Education isn't just a talking point every few years. It's an ongoing commitment to our future. Your participation is vital. Demand excellence. Engage in the process. Make your voice heard. As John Quincy Adams said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, and do more, and become more, you're a leader. The power to reshape our future lies with you. Stay engaged, stay informed, and most of all, be safe out there. I'm Kerwin Gaines, and this is The Agenda. We'll see you next week. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Agenda. Today, we're joined by a dedicated voice in Wilmington's 1st District, Mr. Kobe Owens, an advocate and community organizer running for Wilmington City Council. As a lifelong resident, Kobe has seen firsthand the challenges facing Wilmington, from public safety and housing and economic opportunity. He truly is a champion for change, actively pushing for measures like community violence intervention, affordable housing, sustainable development, that, things that prioritize the people and the future of Wilmington. But Kobe's vision isn't just about addressing symptoms. He's focused on creating lasting change by tackling the root causes of inequality. His work on the Wilmington's Reparation Task Force and commitment to protecting residents from unfair housing practices illustrate a larger goal, to make Wilmington a place where opportunity and security are accessible to all, not just the few. Today, we're going to dive deep into his platform, discussing how he plans to reshape the community and what's at stake for the future of the First District. Stay with us right here on the agenda for an insightful conversation and the path forward. No further ado, Mr. Kobe Owens, welcome to the agenda.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here with you and get to talk a little bit about my vision and the vision for the city as well.
Yeah, I mean, Kobe, I love it. And let me tell you why I love it, okay? I love it because you're young, African-American male that, in my opinion, and I don't get a chance to say this enough about candidates, I kind of refrain, but I know your intentions. I know your intentions, and they are reputable. And I know that you are going to do well once elected. And I look forward to where you are going to go in the future. Like this is the Kobe Owens win, and I'm glad that you're here on the agenda. And maybe you'll save this soundbite for when you're running for Congress.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what you're doing in the First District.
Yeah, so born and raised right in the heart of the First District. Been there my entire life. I'm 29 years old. That is my community. That's home. I've visited other states. I've lived other places, but this is home. And I'm so happy that I was elected by the district in the primary by the Democrats in the district, and I look forward to representing everyone in this upcoming session of Wilmington City Council. We still have the November 5th election, but I have no opponent, but I am still out there knocking doors and talking to people, talking to residents, getting feedback on things. And one of the things that I always say is, while I may have a platform, that I'm a sponge, right? I'm always taking knowledge in and seeing how we can adapt that to make sure it's working for everyone. One of the things that I truly care deeply about is our youth. I am proud to be the board president of the POW Center, which is in the First District. It's one of 3 community centers in the First District. And I get to interact with the families. I get to interact with our youth in the district almost every day, getting to talk to them about issues that matter most to them and engaging them on the ground level.
Yeah, I think that it's important. The POW is great and it affects so many lives, but you do a lot, especially when it comes to ensuring that people are voting for this upcoming election and getting out there, driving people to the polls, and not just for yourself, for other districts as well, and ensuring that they are represented in this election.
Yeah, so, I am the vice chair of the Delaware State Democratic Party here. I'm a DNC member. I was very happy to cast my vote to nominate Kamala Harris to be our nominee and be out there in Chicago back in August. But also back here in Delaware, my job is to making sure everyone's right to vote is protected. I run the voter protection operation. It's been up and running through all of early vote and it will continue through election day. So again, when you're calling that hotline number, if there's any issues, we have a team of attorneys in all 3 counties ready to go and a team of volunteers.
I love it. My question, and especially for you holding, basically the number 2 spot at our Democratic Party here in Delaware, how do you see this race shaping up for, especially on the gubernatorial side and so on? It seems like it's been an uglier election.
It has been. There's been a lot of money spent in this election, whether it was primary or general election. There's millions of dollars being spent. And why? The governor will be able to set the direction of this state for the next 4 years. And when we look at some of our top of the line issues, right? Access to healthcare and rising healthcare prices, our education system, our criminal justice system, and then also creating or taking back access to voting, right? Now, hopefully, I will always be on the side of creating more access, but there are people who want to take away some of that access. So again, the governor is going to be that critical point for the state. And I think it's so important. As you know, we've done multiple debate series together, making sure that people know the information, not from me, not from you, but from the candidates who are running, who are asking for their votes, but then also making sure we hold them accountable. Whoever is our next governor, they're going to have a critical job in this state. This is one of the few times in the history of this state that the incoming governor is going to have a surplus, right? Governor Carney did a good job of leaving that behind for the next coming administration. They're going to have to look at, are they going to change our education funding system to make it more equitable? There was a lawsuit that the NAACP and ACLU won, right? Will there be more money into our schools? We're already talking about the Reading Consortium recommendations, in which here in the city of Wilmington is going to take and remove school districts from this area and kind of consolidate some of the others into Red Clay and Brandywine School District. That's going to cost additional money, especially for some of the inner city schools that are underperforming right now. Or are they going to get the extra resources they need? And why city council may have nothing to do with that part of things, I still think it's important for us to be advocates for our youth who are here in the city.
What has been your pulse? I don't get me started going down this educational rabbit hole. My viewers probably like, please don't do that. What is the pulse that you've been getting from citizens? Because you've knocked on a lot of doors. You've knocked on a lot of doors in regards to education right here in the city and in your district.
Pretty much everyone thinks that our education system's failing.
Okay.
Our kids are falling behind. They are record numbers of kids are not on grade level when it comes to reading, when it comes to writing, when it comes to math proficiency. They believe that there needs to be bold change. And like I said, why city council has very little to do with that. When you're out there talking to people, they don't care what position you're running for.
Right.
They want to make sure their voices are heard. And I think that is where city council could play a role of being additional level of advocates for a better educational system, especially for our inner city kids. My area, we have majority Brandywine School District, but I do have a small portion of Red Clay as of right now. So again, I attend both those school board meetings. We have no representative for my area right now in Brandywine School District. They have voted on naming someone, but that person has not accepted yet, so we don't know the name of the person quite yet. But again, there's so much that needs to be done. We have two beautiful schools in my district, right in the heart of my district, which is P.S. DuPont and Harlan. Both those schools are beautiful, but again, the buildings could look amazing. But if our babies are not learning on the right level, then a beautiful building is really meaningless to
Right.
me.
It doesn't mean anything. And when it comes down to it, the numbers are proving
Yes.
that even in some of our top performing schools, we're still not stellar. You know what I mean? We have a few that are doing well, but so many are not. The big thing, I think, one of the big things for the city of Wilmington, let's change gears a little bit, is dealing with the relationship with law enforcement and crime in the area.
Yes.
Is that within your first, I don't want to say your first 100 days, because I don't think you're the candidate that's going to just leave it as your first 100 days.
No.
It's part of what you want to do. What are some of your plans in bridging that gap?
So anyone who knows me knows I've been very passionate about making sure everyone in our community comes home at the end of the day. And unfortunately, in the last 48 hours, we've had 8 people shot in the city of Wilmington, most of them over north side or northeast parts of Wilmington, right? All very close to me, especially on Halloween. You have multiple shootings while kids are supposed to be out having fun, while parents are out with their kids and everything. we have to do better as a city. And that starts by reimagining what policing looks like, and how do we really integrate that into the community. One of the things we have fought for prior to me getting elected to this position is residency. One, if you live in your neighborhood, you're going to take more ownership of that neighborhood, whether you're a police officer or if you're a resident as well too. And in the residents' mind, if we can get you to become homeowners, you're going to take even more home ownership. It's all holistic, right? We have to start addressing the root causes of violence, which is lack of affordable housing, lack of jobs, but then also working with our public safety, right? And letting them get back to the root of their job, which is protecting and serving. We're asking them to do way too much right now. We want them to be social workers. We want them to be caretakers. We want them to uphold the law. We want them to also be at our schools as well too. We're asking too much of a police department. In my mind, and what I ran on, is creating an Office of Violence Prevention. That Office of Violence Prevention would be very similar to the great work that the state GVI is doing right now, and have caseworkers to work with individuals to not only kind of cut down on the recidivism rate, but then also look to try to resolve conflict prior to it escalating to the death of someone. Because at the end of the day, there's been too much bloodshed here in the city of Wilmington, whether we're losing an individual or an individual is extremely harmed.
Yeah, and I want people to be clear. And I understand what you're doing, but if you think that if you're at home and you think that you're going to get into law enforcement and not have an aspect of social work tied to it,
correct,
you're absolutely mistaken, and you're going to be very disappointed in your current position. Because there is a great deal that comes along with it, and knowing the community is, I think it's great. That you just don't work there, but you live there. It gives you a certain amount of accountability, and having that forethought. I know it's hard with unions and mandating police officers to do certain things, and good luck with that.
Yeah.
I know it's going to be a long road, but what I know that the citizens of Wilmington are looking for is building that trust with the police department. I can't say build it back, because some of them never had it. They never had it to begin with, so we have to start from somewhere. Where some communities had it, and an event caused them to lose it. Like you're saying, 7 people were shot, and I believe 1 killed. That is absolutely ridiculous, and it's senseless. And the communities need resolve, but that resolve can't happen. It cannot happen without having a strong district representation, because that's where it starts. The district rep gets the phone call from everything from.
Trust me, I've already started getting those phone calls.
From, I have someone who's passed in my family, I don't know how to bury them, to citizenship, to so many things. God bless you for taking the position.
I think that also, on a local level, we have to have a good relationship with the other levels of government as well too, so that we can, when issues do come up, constituent issues, you can work with the proper levels of government to actually get it resolved, not just pass everything off. And I do want to say one thing, right? So I give credit where credit is due, and I want to say that Chief Campos, who has not been in the job very long, has done an amazing job at trying to engage the community better over these last few years. And I think you are starting to see a tide change here with the city. And I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. It's still going to be a very long way, but he is making a very valiant effort to change that. And I don't know if he's going to stay or not, but I love the way he is thinking.
I hope he stays.
And the way his officers have been engaging with the community as well too.
I've heard nothing but good things as well. He's actually come on to the agenda, and I'm not saying that just because of that, but I know his policies. I've been in some of the meetings where he has been, and he has spoken in a way where not only does he know the job, he knows the people in the community and how they're going to react to certain legislation, and he knows his officers, and he knows how they're going to react to certain legislation. And that shows that your sleeves are rolled up and you're ready to work.
Yeah.
So I truly hope that he stays on as chief of police and continues to better this city. The other big part of the city right now, and a lot of issues facing council, and that's development, economic growth in the city, and how the council's role in that, the decisions you make. People think that you can control everything, and why is this happening, and why is the riverfront and this and that and this and that. But there's only so much the council can do. But what they can do can be effective.
Yes, yeah. So with housing, I was very honored to be endorsed by President Obama's former housing secretary, Julian Castro, who I consider a friend. When it comes to housing in the city of Wilmington, there's a few things that I would love to see done on the policy side of things. So one is creating inclusionary zoning here in the city of Wilmington to make sure that
The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Good evening, Delaware, and welcome to The Agenda. Tonight, we will have a conversation that speaks to the heart of what it means to challenge the norms. In a place where the political lines seem all but etched in stone, our guest, Brenda Minella, a Republican candidate, in a state that doesn't have a large Republican presence, is here tonight to share why she believes Delaware is ready for a change, ready for a different vision, and ready to consider something beyond the usual suspects. We're not here to push an agenda. We're here to uncover it. And as we dig into her policies, her principles, and the future she envisions, I invite you to listen carefully, because in an era of sound bites and talking points, tonight we're here to get to the substance. This is The Agenda, and we're glad you're here. So please, I invite you to be a part of the conversation. Ms. Minella, welcome to The Agenda.
Thank you for having me, Kerwin.
We appreciate you being here. Want to get some information out about you. You're a first-time guest here to The Agenda. You're running for Mike Ramone's seat in the Pike Creek area.
Yes.
And this election has been very, very busy for all candidates, and I know that you are no exception.
That's true. Very, very busy.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm sure everybody would love to know. I know you've knocked on a lot of doors here over the past few months, but there are still some folks out there that may not know who you are.
Okay. Well, my name is Brenda Minella, and I am a native Delawarean, born and raised here. I am actually from Sussex County, and I moved to Newcastle County in 1990, and I've been here ever since. Currently, I'm working as a teacher. I've been working as a teacher for the past 16 years here in Newcastle County, and I decided to run for office because Delaware does need a change.
Mm-hmm. I'm in agreement with that. I believe that we do need a change, but we need a really good change, right? We need something that we have. Ms. Minella, we have so many issues.
Yes.
Right? And you mentioned that you were a teacher.
Yes.
And in a very difficult district is Christina, I
Yes.
believe. And there's a lot of change that's needed in education. Is that something that you're running strongly on? Is that, the change that you'd like to see?
That's the area that I feel that if we can make major changes in education, it will also help in the other areas of Delaware. And one, for example, is crime. If we can fix some of the problems that we have with the education, it will solve some of the crime problems that we have. And it can also solve some of the economic problems that we have. It's one of those problems that will spill into every area, and it has.
And it has. And I've made it clear to the candidates during the debate that we've had earlier this week. I've made it clear to candidates when they're right here on the agenda that the Department of Education needs reform itself, change, overhaul, whatever the politically correct way is to say it. There's a problem in Dover, and I think that a lot of it stems from there, not necessarily of the information that they're putting out, but just from an overall lack of oversight and understanding of what the true problems are. I need for a Department of Education to be fully engaged into what the issues are. And when I believe we're fifth in the nation, at the bottom of the nation in regards to education, I think it's easy to say that there's a disconnect there. Mm-hmm. I am optimistic that through the election, one way or another, because of the amount of light that we've placed on it, that there is going to be change. But I need for the candidates to truly engage on education. So tell me, how are you going to truly engage if elected in Dover?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is take a look at the education system that we have here in Delaware. At one time, we were ranking pretty high in the country. Mm-hmm. That was a good time. And people moved across the country and they weren't afraid to move to Delaware and enter their students in the school system. But now many people are bypassing Delaware. They're coming, they're looking and researching and deciding not to even move to Delaware because of how poorly the education system is right now. What I would like to do is to set up or work along with different committees to investigate, like a task force, to see where the areas are that need to be fixed, and see which schools in Delaware or which districts in Delaware aren't doing so bad, and see what they're doing. We have so many different districts here in Delaware, different curriculums, different everything, that we really do need to take a look, a very, very serious look, because if we don't, we're just going to ruin this generation.
I don't believe that I don't believe that we should say anything poor about generations to come, but I do believe that they have some work to do. I believe that we're not going to get the results that we've all hoped for, and we have ourselves to blame for it. That's a whole nother topic. I don't want to take up your time here with that, but I can go on about education in Delaware for a long time. There may be some misconceptions about you. There have been some mailers that you believe have gone out and have spoken incorrectly about who you are.
True.
And this is your time to kind of fix that. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I believe that we should follow the Constitution, the Delaware Constitution, that if things need to be changed in Delaware, that we need to do things constitutionally. So I do support our Constitution, the Delaware and the United States Constitution. And I believe that we have the Second Amendment for a purpose, that we have a right to protect ourselves, to protect our family, and to protect our property. But that doesn't mean that I feel that children, that I was kind of like blamed for mass murders and things through the country. I have nothing to do with that. I don't support anything like that, and I don't appreciate literature being put out that I support that kind of I'm an extremist when it comes to the Second Amendment. That's just not true. Things have been sent out that I don't care about children. I'm like, I've been teaching for 16 years plus. I love children. Never hurt a child in my life. I'm in a field where I'm with children all the time. I teach, I love it. And to have literature put out that I don't care about children, I don't care anything about the senior citizens, and that's not true. There's so many things said about me. I have no idea where they came from. They are absolutely not true.
So when we're talking about rights, what is your feeling and your stance in regards to reproductive rights for women?
Well, that's pretty much been said and done earlier this year. I really haven't had anything to say about it. It's not on the ballot. It's not on my website. And when I was out knocking on thousands of doors, no one talked about it.
So right now on the agenda, do you feel as though reproductive rights are essential for women and that the legislation should not be currently changed?
Do I feel it should be changed or not?
Or not changed?
Okay.
Do you agree with it?
I agree that it was voted on here. It was sent from the federal back to the states, and people voted on what they wanted.
Okay. So trying to get a sense and an idea of what you support and believe, you've mentioned that, and I too am a gun owner and a gun supporter. I understand, I believe it is all of our rights due to the Second Amendment to carry a firearm and to purchase one legally here in the state of Delaware. But how do you feel about those rights and securing those rights? At what lengths would you go in order to secure those rights for Delawareans?
I want to make sure that people that have firearms or want to purchase firearms, that they are mentally well and that they should pass the background checks. I also feel that they should pass background checks not periodically, but things change in people's lives, situations change, and sometimes those situations can affect people in a negative way. So I think just one background check is not enough forever, that maybe every 5 years, 3 years, or whatever the case is. But I do believe that they should pass background checks.
Okay. When it comes to economics here in the state of Delaware, we're fortunate enough to live in a state currently that has a surplus. Delaware has a surplus. So the incoming administration has a little bit of breathing room in regards to finances. It only takes one situation, you know what I mean, to change things. But one of the large drivers that some Delawareans don't understand is that our representatives are business developers, right? They ensure that small businesses getting what they need, that they have legislation passed that supports small business. We're also here to solicit larger businesses to come to this area with several factors. How do you plan? What is your idea? What is your perfect picture of how you would support that here in Delaware?
The first thing I would like to do is to take a look at some of the concerns that people have about being overregulated, because a lot of businesses are failing because of too many regulations or just too many rules and things like that they can't really get up off their feet. So I would take a look at all the regulations and look at what has been talked about in legislature. A lot of business owners do contact legislators. Just take a look at it, not just, have it come in and out. Just take a look and see if those points are valid and review those regulations.
Right. When we're soliciting businesses in Delaware, how would you go about that? How would you bring more business into Delaware?
That's a tough question.
I mean, it's hard, I know, to be a freshman, so to speak, representative, but the large part of what we do is helping to bring business into Delaware, supporting it, like you said, the tax structure over regulation, but also going out there and being a talking point, a salesperson, so to speak, for the state. It's something that we need. Our state has not grown dramatically in the past 22 years in regards to economic growth. Our footprint is still the same. It's actually shrinking. There has to be legislation in place to help grow this. There is some, but it's obviously ineffective if we're not growing. I believe that Delawareans are looking for leadership in Dover to support that and to keep that at the forefront of their mind in regards to growing the state. So we hope that if elected and you get down to Dover, you really grab that by the horns and bring that to Delaware.
I would. In fact, I worked for the Department of Labor years ago, and we were always trying to bring business here to Delaware. New companies, they used our facilities for interviewing and all of that, and that's something that we needed to take a look at to help Delaware grow. And like you said, nothing's really changed for years. We have to make a change. A change has to happen, or we're going to continue down the same path.
Let's take a look and think about if elected, your first 100 days into office. What would be some of the things that you would do that you would hit the ground running?
One of the first things I would do is work on education. I would like to find out what the real problems are. And I have talked with someone from the Cesar Rodney Institute who can put together what we call the BOLD plan.
Tell us a little bit more about the BOLD plan.
Well, the BOLD plan was created by Ron Russo, and he's part of the Cesar Rodney Institute. And the BOLD plan is basically shifting from having the district and all of the board members and all of that at the top and shifting it to the bottom so that the principals and the local staff would be running the schools instead of someone up top from some other place running everything, that it would be run by the administrators right in the schools.
So you believe that the BOLD plan is taking people that are right there on the ground and making the decisions rather than policymakers from, say, the Board of Education,
Yes.
top high, that don't know exactly what's going on in there in the schools and making those decisions.
Making those decisions because they're there.
So when it comes, what else would you like to accomplish in your first 100 days?
I would like to take a look at the crime rate in Delaware and see where we can improve that, help reduce crime, look at some of the things that have been passed, some of the things that need to happen in Delaware.
So when it comes to crime, are you thinking more police? Are you thinking less police, more legislation? What are your thoughts on that?
I think we don't have enough police, and they're recruiting very hard trying to get police. I mean, we all need police to help us. I'm not one of those people that want to defund the police at all. But we need to take a look at some of the crimes that are being committed, some of the areas where the crime is being committed, and look at some of the, like you said, the policies and see if we can make a difference there.
Right, right. How do you think you'll bring Dover together, right? So it's hard down there, right? It's very hard to get things passed. You have to work together as a team. You have to go on both sides of the aisles. Do you think that'll be a problem for you?
It won't be a problem for me. At this time, it's kind of unbalanced, and I'm hoping that it will become more balanced because we have to represent everybody. We cannot represent just one group of people. And I'm easy to work with, and I'm very open, and I wouldn't mind working with people from the other party. We are Delawareans, and we have to work together.
Yeah. So are you committed to this?
Yes.
It is definitely something that you're 100% behind, and you are ready to hit the ground running if elected in January.
Yes.
What are some of the fears that you have in regards to this position?
What are some of my fears? I think the greatest fear is maybe working with people that don't want to be worked with. I've thought about that. I mean, you cannot make somebody work with you. And I see that we have two parties, but I want to see us working together as a whole to make a difference.
So establishing party unity?
Yes.
And
Yes.
just unity as a whole and representation in the state. I think that's really important. What is it that some folks out there may not know about you that you want them to know?
Well, most people know that I'm a very caring person, and I'm a very, very honest person. In fact, this is my second time running. 2 years ago, I ran for state senate, for Senatorial District 9. And I was told by several people, you'll never get in office because you're too honest. And that was kind of a shock because I thought, you should be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the expectation is for the people that are voting for you, that they're expecting that honesty and they want that fortitude in ensuring that their issues are being heard and listened and then acted upon.
Yes.
The confidence, I think, is what people are looking for, right? The confidence in knowing that their representation is truly representing them.
That is true. And several people have said that to me. Are you going to do what you say you're going to do?
Right.
Are you going to be available like you said you're available? And I keep my word.
And is that what you want folks at home to take away? that you're going to keep your word for the people of your district.
Yes.
They are
Yes.
going to know who's in control,
Yes.
and that you are going to support Delawareans as a whole, regardless of party.
That's true. And even in my district, the 21st district, I have to work with people that they're both parties. And I told them, I said, it doesn't matter to me. If you call me and tell me you need something done, I'm not going to ask you which party you're from. I'm going to try to help you. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, as you're knocking on these doors and you're going from house to house, and I know, again, you've knocked on a lot of doors, what has been that consensus? What is that thing that they're asking for, or things that you've seen that folks are really asking for?
Believe it or not, education.
That's it, huh?
That's the main thing. Even people who don't have children, they talk about their tax dollars being wasted. And people who have children, grandparents that are raising children, they're talking about they want their children to have a good education so that they can be self-supporting. And I actually met one lady, she heard me talking to someone next door. She stepped out and she was talking to me. She said, do you know, we have a daughter, and we moved 3 times in 1 year trying to get her in a good school.
So the reason for their move was the education system and the lack thereof here in the state of Delaware.
Yes, 3 times in 1 year.
In our final moments here, what are some parting words you'd like to give to someone that's going to make that decision on Tuesday?
I need your vote. If you want to call me, you can call me. If you want to email me, get in touch with me, you can reach me at www.workingforun.de. Call me. I'm here for Pike Creek citizens, and I am here for Delawareans, period.
And so here we are, Delaware, facing an election season that's not just about red and blue. It's about a choice, a direction, a chance to decide who we are and who we want to be. Brenda Minella represents a vision that might not look like the traditional Delaware path. And that's exactly why she's here. Agree or disagree, democracy depends on our ability to listen, to weigh ideas, and to look beyond what we've known and decide for ourselves. Tonight, I'm asking you to do more than just watch, think, engage, and be relentless in your pursuit of the truth. Because democracy isn't a spectator sport, and it's going to take all of us to make it work. So stay tuned, stay informed, stay questioning, and remember that the choices you make just don't define your future. They define Delaware's. Thank you for joining us tonight. On the agenda, be safe, be thoughtful, and keep pushing forward. See you next time. Good evening and welcome to the agenda. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Tonight we're addressing an issue that stands at the core, the very core of our democracy, and that's the power of the vote. We're privileged and honored to have Ms. Jennifer Tompkins, CEO of the Wilmington Metropolitan Urban League, and she's brought a friend, a very good friend, Ms. Jerica Richardson, Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the National Urban League. Thank you so much for joining us. And Mr. Kobe Owens, Advocacy Manager of the Wilmington Metropolitan Urban League, thank you so much for joining us. These three individuals, these are leaders here to shed light on the Reclaim Your Vote initiative, a campaign that's not only about encouraging more people to the polls, it is also about the fight against the insidious barriers that often deny citizens their voice. Let's not mince words here, people. Voter suppression is real. It's happening, and it affects Black and brown people in our community and all throughout the country. It's profoundly disturbing. The Reclaim Your Vote initiative, that's what we're here to talk about tonight, tackles these barriers. With unwavering belief in the democratic process, it isn't complete until every eligible voter can fully participate. This program goes beyond just information. It's about education, it's about action, and it's about providing the resources needed to make the power of the vote accessible to all. Tonight's conversation will explore what the Urban League and the program are doing not only to mobilize communities, but to protect and reclaim the right that gives shape to everything else we hold dear. In a time when every vote truly counts, they're here to remind us that the civic engagement isn't a privilege, it's a duty, it's a right guaranteed to every citizen. Welcome, Ms. Tompkins, and welcome, Ms. Richardson, to the agenda. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
We're excited to have you back. The last time I think you were here was during the election.
Yeah, primary
Primary
night.
election coverage, dealing with the vote.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I put a post out about it. Only 22% of Delawareans actually came out to vote. We, in my opinion, I've put my viewers to the test. We are not taking it seriously. Some people say, oh, well, it's going to pick up in the primary. I actually talked to one campaign manager that said, oh, 22%, that's not bad. That's not bad. They made it very clear, and it was a Democratic campaign manager. I think they're anticipating my feeling, Kerwin's world. I think that they are feeling as though the less that vote, the better they can control the outcome, right? And they feel as though the Delaware voters, I can't speak to other voters from other states, but I think the feeling, the consensus is that Delaware voters are almost puppets on a string. We know how they're going to vote. We know what they stand for. We know the magic words, whatever. So if we're putting the right candidates in place, we don't have to worry about them coming out. I know that's not how you feel. I know that's not the way the Metropolitan Urban League of Wilmington feels. Please tell us a little bit about this initiative and why you're here tonight.
Yeah, well, one, thank you so much for having me on the show, and certainly my friends that are here as well. 22%, that's why I'm here. 22%, I will tell you, I am a self-proclaimed overachiever. It was of my whole life, and if I came home with a 22% on my report card, it would not have been.
Problems and repercussions.
Yes,
right?
very much so, very much so. And so that's the same seriousness I take this voting.
Right.
And so this is something that is a God-given right as a citizen of this country. And so every single person should be exercising their right to vote.
Yeah.
And, you know, oftentimes I talk about voting almost ritualistic in the sense of we do this if we don't do it for any other reason. If we don't do it because we know every candidate on the ballot, we do it because those who lived and died to ensure that we had the right to vote. So you do it just for that. And so that's why I am here, the 22%, and hoping that that other 88% will get out on November the 5th and vote. And so, but to talk a little bit about the Urban League, which is one of my favorite topics, I lead out the Urban League here in Wilmington, Delaware, and I am privileged myself and working with a great team of folks at the Urban League to ensure that folks get out to vote. We have education programs, we have workforce programs, we have health and wellness programs. But here in this season, we are ensuring that folks get out and vote. And so the Urban League, we are an affiliate of the National Urban League. We are 92 affiliates strong across this entire nation. And Kerwin, I don't know if you know this, but the Urban League, I love talking about this because I'm a historian. So the Urban League was actually founded in 1910, and it was founded in New York City. And you know why it was founded? Because it was a response to the Great Migration. So the millions of African African Americans who are moving from the South to the North, or from rural communities to urban communities, because we do have urban leagues that are in the South as well. And so the Urban League started off as a social service organization, and it wasn't until the 1960s where one of our presidents, Whitney M. Young, who was great friends with Coretta King and Dr. King, and they urged him to say, listen, the Urban League cannot just sit down on the sidelines and just do social services. We must also have advocacy.
Right.
And so ensuring that rights of Black and brown folks are here. And also, one of the things that we talk about in our mission statement here at the Wilmington Urban League, to ensure that everyone has economic self-reliance. And so when we talk about voting, it also comes into that play as well. And
we're going to have Greg, sorry to cut you off there, we're going to have Greg Coverdale on the show here next week.
Oh.
And he's talking about that.
Yeah.
He's talking about that, and if you don't know who that is, he is a professor or at Delaware State University, excuse me, and he is talking about the importance of financial independence right here, and what and the privileges that it can give not only to you but to future generations. Sorry to get off on a thing, but
no.
I think it's more important.
But I often think that folks don't think that those things are connected, right? The way in which we go to the ballot box, right, in which we exercise our vote, is really setting up the future of what we have access to.
Right. I love it.
And let's just be clear, right? I'm gonna be very, very clear. We are, as the Urban League, we are a nonpartisan organization, right? But we also understand, to achieve economic self-reliance for Black and brown folks, there are certain agenda items that are just higher on the list, right? And certain candidates have. And so we are here again to talk about our Reclaim Your Vote campaign. And this is a national campaign. And so I am so happy that I have a friend here from the National Urban League, Jericho Richardson, who is leading the charge with Reclaim Your Vote across the entire nation. And so I would love for her to really talk a little bit more just about this initiative that's coming through from a national scale.
Ms. Richardson, the thing that gets me is that people are under the impression, and 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought this. 5 years, no, maybe it would have been 5 years I would have thought this. They are under the impression that things cannot change back to the way they used to be. We've seen how the Supreme Court is stacked, so to speak, towards one party or another, and how things can change. We look at this in regards to reproductive rights for women, and how nobody would have thought that would have ever been overturned. Those things are happening, and to me, you can see the interference that goes on in certain states, some of them southern here in the United States, but things are changing. Things are changing. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's critically important that we keep our foot on the gas.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you. It's so great to be here in Wilmington with you all. As mentioned, I'm Jericho Richardson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the National Urban League. And I will say I lead a new division that was established in 2020 post the tragic deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others. So as my colleague Jennifer mentioned, the League is one of the oldest legacy civil rights organizations in the country. We've always been doing civil rights and engaged in voting rights and justice. But to your point, we recognize that there may be folks that feel comfortable, that think the gains that we had in the 1960s and 70s, things are okay, and that might speak to that 22%. But we can't get comfortable, because every step that we've made forward, unfortunately, there are people in this country who are committed to pushing progress back.
Right.
And so that's why this division was established, to support the 92 affiliates across the country who are on the ground doing the work day in and day out. And we're unique and special, and not only do they provide direct services unlike other organizations, but they are engaged in this battle and this advocacy work day in and day out. And so you can go into an urban league and get resources in help getting purchasing a home, or after school programs for your children. But at the same time, we're also going to ask you, are you registered to vote? We really want to make sure that we are hitting every single person in our community. Voter registration, voter education, and voter mobilization are critically important. And so all the things that I know our families, our communities care about, we understand and recognize that no one is going to be able to live that American dream if we don't ensure access to the ballot box continues. And we've seen that across the country, there have been attacks on access, or we're dealing with folks, as I said before, that are comfortable. We really have to create this culture of civic engagement.
Yeah. Are you seeing, I mean, of course we're seeing more of it, but what's the feedback that you're getting as you're dealing with voters and you're going to these rallies and you're doing so much out in the community? What's the feedback that you're getting from the people? I mean, are they just laissez-faire about it? Like, what is it? I want to know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think from what we've seen, you talked about the Supreme Court, there's been a lot of policy changes across the country. From the voters that we've been talking to, I realize and I feel that they understand that there is so much at stake. We've been knocking on doors across the country. I've been in Michigan, I've been in Georgia, I've been in North Carolina, I've been in Pennsylvania, and I'm here in Delaware now. We've showed up and a lot of folks are like, oh, I've already voted. I've voted early. So there is enthusiasm, and people are not only just telling us, they're telling us why. They're telling us their personal stories, things having to do with their family, challenges with reproductive rights, being, going through IVF themselves and being concerned about not being able to have a family because of some of the things that we're seeing sweep across the country. People are concerned about, quite frankly, attacks on marginalized communities. We see that coming up over and over and over again. And as an organization that focuses on opportunity and diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can look at the shirts right here. That is our mission and that is our focus this year. We want to defend democracy because it is absolutely under attack. We want to demand diversity, equity, and inclusion because although there may have been cases geared towards academia, the business community is moving forward and saying, oh, we don't need diversity, even though we know diversity is critically important for business. And then finally, we have to defeat poverty because people in this country, there can be times where there's the haves and the have-nots, and we want to make sure that everyone is taken care of.
I think it's important that people understand that these are targeted attacks. These just aren't attacks. There's a reason why they're going for these marginalized communities. And it's our numbers and it's the power of our vote and what those votes can do and how they can swing elections in one way or another. So attacks, yes, but they're targeted. They are targeted for certain communities.
It's not random.
Yeah, it's not random at all. And we have another person here, Mr. Kobe Owens, who has, his finger on the pulse of Wilmington. He even knew when the construction was going down on the street and Market Street. This guy knows, and we're excited to have him here on the show. And he has done a lot for several reasons throughout the community and knowing what's going on. But Kobe, you know exactly what's going on with voting here in the state of Delaware.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do here, and the Urban League's leading that fight right now. When we talk about creating assets, right, we have to look at us as a state compared to other states. Georgia actually has more assets to the ballot box than Delaware does, right? So if we here not around the table talking about why this is an issue and how can we make it more equitable for our people here in Delaware to go vote, then I don't know what the Urban League's doing. If that's not what we're supposed to, that's our charge. That's what we're supposed to be doing on the ground, and that's what we're doing right here in Delaware. We have fought to get early voting in Delaware, and this is the second cycle that we've had it. And you've seen historic numbers so far in Delaware.
It's working.
Over 130,000 people have early voted already. And we only have a small 10-day window of early voting here, but that is huge. Why? Because voting here is a community thing. It's encouraging others to go out and vote, and now our faith leaders are getting involved, doing souls to the polls here, encouraging their congregations to go out and vote. But our work isn't done just there. One of the initiatives that we're also pushing is making sure individuals who are sitting in jail in pre-trial, have not been convicted of a crime, have the access to still have their voices heard here in Delaware. And while you can do a a mail-in ballot through absentee, they don't have the access to either apply for those absentee ballots at the level that they need to. So again, we want to make sure that the voting machines are right there in the prison to allow individuals who are on pretrial to be able to vote. But when it comes to this election right here, this is one of the most important elections in Delaware's history. We have an open governor, open lieutenant governor, open mayor, open county exec, open county council president, open senator, open Congress, our sole Congress seat. So again, our voices need to be heard in this election to let them know, hey, don't forget about us.
Right.
And I think that's what this is all about. This is why we're boots on the ground. This is why we're out there talking to people, getting people registered to vote, whether it's new voters who are just turning 18, excited to get their driver licenses, or if it's people who haven't voted since the Obama years,
Right.
getting them re-registered to vote, or individuals who may have been convicted of a felony but now is off of probation, making sure they know that it's their right here in Delaware that they can re-register and become an active member of this society. So that's what we're doing here at the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League. And you know, we have a amazing group of young volunteers. I just want to give a quick shout out to all the BSUs, the Black Student Unions, who have said that this year they wanted to get involved, and they got involved with the Urban League to make sure that we are getting out there into all communities up and down this state.
So I want to put this question is for everyone here at the table. Why? And I've asked this in regards to education from gubernatorial candidates. I've asked it, like, why are we so behind in Delaware? I mean, you look at it with education, we are 5th in the country, not from the top, from the bottom in regards to education. We're 25th in regards to healthcare. We only have 1 million people in 3 counties. This can't be that hard to be able to figure out. And when it gets down to rights to vote, right, that's intentional. You know, it's intentional. And I hear so many of the candidates, and we've had them all come through the show, talk about what they're going to do and how, you know, on both sides. No, I'm not against this, I'm not against that, and all the soundtracks what it takes to become elected. But when it comes down to voter rights, we're still falling behind. So my conversation to them is, well, what are you doing? Some of you are being reelected, and this problem still exists. So this happened on your watch. So what is it that you think is causing this issue?
So I'll say this, right? In Delaware, there's a proximity to power issue. If people know exactly, like you said at the beginning of this show, if they know exactly where they're going to get their votes from, that's less work that they have to do. They can focus on something else. They can focus on fundraiser or whatsoever. We do not accept that, right? We believe that everyone should have their voices heard. And it's multiple tiers to that here in Delaware, whether you're talking about at the state level, or if you're talking at the municipality level. Outside of Wilmington, most of our municipalities here have their own voter registration, which means if you don't know that when you move into one of these small towns, that you have to go to their local clerk or their local town manager and register with them, not just register with the state, then you're not going to know and you're not going to be able to vote. I call it a dual registration, right? Which shouldn't be allowed. But again, that's what we're dealing with here in Delaware. And that's why it's so important to make sure we're getting our message out, that you do have the power, right? And you can kind of disrupt the norms by speaking out, by voting, by getting engaged and volunteering and getting other people informed. There's a ton of different resources. You can come to us, you can look at the League of Women Voters. There's resource guides about where people actually stand, but also stay engaged with us. Get involved with our Building People Power campaign, and we will help train you to make sure you're staying involved and staying up to date about what is going on in your community so that you have the resources and the tools to be an advocate for yourself in your neighborhood.
And let me just add on to that too. I mean, I think it's this piece of also holding every elected official accountable.
I love that piece.
And so in making sure that we do it in a way in which folks listen, right? And so one of the great things that the National Urban League does, which I absolutely love, and I am replicating it here, is giving our elected officials a scorecard, right? How did they deliver each year on what they ran their campaign on, right? And so because I think a large part of what we have got out of in America, right, is understanding that the people truly do have the power, right? but it is up to us to be able to empower one another, and through the Urban League, in which we are an empowerment organization, to empower, right, the people to have the power and to hold those elected officials accountable for every single thing that they ran on that ballot for.
Right. And Delaware is funny, and there's a good chance your elected official. You'll see them at the Wawa, you'll see them at the charcoal pit, you'll see them around, you'll see them at your kid's ball game, you know what I mean, or what have you. And we have, and for our viewers that are watching outside of Delaware, it's very different here. It's very different here. So it upsets me that people can be so relaxed when they're out in public, but we still have these issues. We still have people that don't understand their rights, that are behind bars. We still need to have these big voting, reclaim your vote conversations and all these other things here in this state. There has to come a time, I think, in Delawareans where we're no longer accepting this. And I love the drive of the Urban League to kindly ensure that this is happening, but let the populace know that, hey, one, we have your back, and two, we're not going to let this stand. We're going to make a change in regards to it. And I don't think...
And you got to meet us halfway, right?
You have to
that's
meet us halfway.
Reclaim your vote.
We can't
reclaim your vote for you, right? And we're saying like, hey, you have to reclaim your vote. And so I think the first part of this, right, is making sure that you get out on November 5th if you haven't voted already, right? And so that's the first part of that.
There's very few excuses that I know that I accept now because of all the ways that you can vote. And granted, Georgia's doing better than us, but we still have several ways that you can vote.
Right.
And the fact that you're not... And, the old adage, well, you can't complain. Well, people still complain, but you have done nothing in the process in regards to it. So you're absolutely right. There is some responsibility. Jennifer, you shocked me. I mean, you absolutely shocked me when you told me about Middletown, Delaware. And the fact that it did not do well in regards to voter turnout in the primary in September. And it shocked me because I'm a resident of Middletown, right? So I'm thinking, hey, we're doing good, we're showing off, we, blah, blah, blah. And, we're dropping the ball. And so I did a little query of friends and folks that live in Middletown, and they're like, it's just a primary. It's just a primary. We already knew that this was gonna happen, or that was gonna happen, or whatever. I'm like, that's the excuse?
Yeah.
That's the excuse? Oh, it's just a primary. 22% of eligible voters decided, that it was important.
But I will also say this also brings to bear, and we talk about this a lot of times in our office, right? The culture of voting, right? And so, okay, it could be a small election. Okay, maybe it's not many results, right? But having a culture of voting, I vote because that's what we're supposed to do, right? And so I think that is lost, certainly, in a lot of our communities here in Delaware, but certainly even across the nation, right? Absolutely. This culture of this is what I'm supposed to do, right? Almost as, it should be almost as natural as, or unnatural, whatever, depending on who you are, as paying taxes, right? Is that, nope, I go out and I vote if I'm eligible, right? And so that's the other piece of this. And I think that's where the Urban League certainly comes in as that trusted voice to say, voting, it should be very much a part of your life, right?
And why?
Yeah.
And why it needs to be. And I expressed this in a previous episode, is that people, you don't have to look far to find people who didn't always have that right. They are still here in your community, in your diner, in your family room, at your next, Thanksgiving's in a few weeks. Ask some of the gray-haired folk that are at your table about what it was like back in the 60s and 50s, especially if they lived in the southern parts of the United States. This was not something that they could do. There are people in your family that drank from separate water fountains, that couldn't sit together in a movie theater, had to use the balcony, and you don't have to go far. That was right here in Delaware. That was right here in Delaware. We had African-American police officers in Delaware that had to change at the Walnut Street Y because they weren't allowed to change in the police station. You may not know that, but that is true. And those folks are still alive. Okay?
And
so
things can quickly
go right back to the way.
And that's why the public education piece is so important. And I'm glad you brought up that example because we talked about folks getting comfortable, but it's also important that we connect the dots for people. Right? And this culture of civic engagement is critically important because we also got to think about the census. When people start talking about resources coming to their community, this is the thing that the muscle that we have to exercise routinely. And things can show up very differently. We can't just dismiss something because it's a primary.
Right.
It really does have to be routine. And when we talk about things going back, when you don't engage, changes happen. Legislation gets passed. People that you may not have paid too much attention to get in office, and you may find yourself in a very different scenario that you assumed was routine, but found out it was not. We saw the gains, and part of the reason we also sometimes there is more education that we need to do, and that's why the National Urban League is putting civics education into our Project Ready programming, so that we do with young people, high schoolers and middle schoolers. It's important we're doing that because we saw since the 1970s, there's been a steady decline in civics education across the country. And why is that? That's intentional. Because we saw the rise in Black political power. We saw the rise in political power from other marginalized communities when people started to exercise their right to vote and be represented, and there was a lot more progress that was happening. Dollars going towards education civics education started to decline. So if there's something that people are taking away from you, you need to ask yourself, why is that? And so we're taking it upon ourselves to not worry about what other folks are going to do. We are investing in our communities and are focused on educating our folks, our people, our young people, and reminding them why they need to know this information, why they need to have this culture of civic engagement, because these gains will go backwards.
Yeah, they will, and I'm excited, and I'll tell you why I'm excited, because sometimes you think there's not organizations like the Urban League out here. You know, when it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm staring at my ceiling fan, dealing with all the problems of the world, I don't know if I'm the only person that does that or not, but you know, I think, who is taking care of this? Like, is this all me? Like, is this, you know, those type of things. So knowing that these organizations are out here and that there's competent folk making good ideas as to what needs to be done, my hat's off to the entire folks. Everyone here, please reclaim your vote quickly. Please tell them where they can find more information, which websites they can go to, and we'll put it on the screen.
So
Go ahead.
they can go to reclaimyourvote.org. You can go to NUL.org, or you can go to MWUL.org and find more information at all those websites.
Sounds like you've heard it here. As we close tonight, let's take a hard look at where we stand with voting in Delaware. Right now, 786,577 Delawareans are registered, with nearly half identifying as Democrats, a quarter as Republicans, and the rest opting for no party at all. In the 2020 presidential election, Delaware exceeded national voter turnout, hitting 67.7%. But just 2 years later, less than half of registered voters showed up to the polls, ladies and gentlemen. And this year, in 2024, the primary turnout limped to 22%. These are numbers, sure, but they're more than that. They're a message. We're not just dealing with apathy. We're looking at disengagement, disconnection from a system that's supposed to represent us all. And before we move on, let's remember this. The right to vote was never a given, especially not for African Americans here in Delaware. This wasn't just a chapter in a history book. It was a brutal, relentless struggle. In Delaware, like so many places, Black Americans faced down poll taxes, literacy tests, and outright intimidation, systematic barriers designed to keep them silent, even with the 15th Amendment supposedly guaranteeing the right to vote. True access was denied for generations, and despite it all, they persisted and they won. The Reclaim Your Vote initiative isn't just about pushing more people to the polls. It's about ensuring that no one has to fight that same battle again. And it's about reminding us all that this right was hard won. So what are we doing with it? That's the question. Thank you for tuning in to the agenda tonight. And remember, the strength of our vote, the strength of our democracy, isn't some abstract concept. It's real, and it depends on our willingness to act. So don't let apathy decide your future. Stay engaged, stay informed, and let's protect what so many before us fought to secure. Good night, be safe, and thanks for tuning in.